If you don't subscribe to the channel, all the stories will happen to you. Get ready for the nightmare. The old library on the outskirts of town had always held a quiet, somber atmosphere. It was a relic from the past, untouched by time, yet slowly fading away from memory, much like the stories it held within. For years, locals whispered about its secrets, but few ever ventured inside. For Emily, though, it had always been a place of solace, a retreat from the chaos of daily life. The towering shelves, the smell of old paper, and the silence that filled every corner made her feel at peace. But today, as she pushed open the heavy wooden door, a shiver ran down her spine. The familiar creak of the hinges seemed more pronounced, echoing through the dimly lit interior with an eerie resonance. She paused for a moment at the entrance, taking in the sight of the vast, empty space before her. Dust particles floated lazily in the beams of sunlight that pierced through the dirty windows, giving the place an almost dreamlike quality. Emily had come to the library to work on her research for a university project, one that required her to dig through archives of local history. There were rumors that this library housed forgotten records, untouched for decades, and she was determined to uncover them. As she made her way toward the back of the building, where the older volumes were kept, a strange sensation settled in her chest, a feeling of being watched, though no one else was there. The further she walked, the more oppressive the air became. The soft shuffle of her footsteps seemed loud in the empty space, and the faint hum of the building settling only added to the growing tension. She passed rows of shelves, her fingers brushing against the spines of books that hadn't been touched in years. Some were thick and ancient, with cracked leather covers, while others were thin and fragile, their pages yellowed with age. Finally, she reached the far corner of the library where the archives were stored. The room was small and dimly lit, with a single dusty window at the far end. The shelves here were packed with records, old newspapers, journals, and ledgers, all crammed together in no particular order. Emily scanned the titles, searching for anything that might be relevant to her project, but something else caught her eye. On the floor, partially hidden beneath a stack of old newspapers, was a small, crumpled piece of paper. It looked out of place, as if it had been discarded carelessly, yet something about it drew her in. She knelt down and picked it up, smoothing out the wrinkles as she examined it. The handwriting was shaky, almost frantic, and the ink had faded over time, but the message was still legible. "Help me, please." Her heart skipped a beat as she stared at the note. It was strange, unsettling even, but it could have been written by anyone, at any time. She told herself it was probably just a joke, a prank left behind by some bored student or a previous visitor. But as she held the paper in her hands, a chill ran down her spine. The desperation in the words felt too real, too urgent. Emily looked around the room, her eyes scanning the shelves and corners, but nothing seemed out of place. She tucked the note into her pocket, deciding to focus on her research for now. There was no reason to get worked up over something so small. But as she pulled out an old ledger from one of the shelves and began flipping through its pages, her mind kept drifting back to the note. Who had written it? And why had it been left here, in this forgotten corner of the library? Time passed slowly as she sifted through the records, but the feeling of unease never left her. The quiet was no longer comforting, it was suffocating. Every creak, every soft rustle of paper seemed to echo louder in her ears. She glanced at her watch. She had been there for hours, yet she had found nothing useful for her project. Frustrated, she closed the ledger and stood up, stretching her legs. As she prepared to leave, something caught her eye, a small door at the far end of the room, barely noticeable behind a tall shelf. It was old and worn, with a rusty handle, and it looked as if it hadn't been opened in years. Curiosity tugged at her. She had been in this library many times before, but she had never noticed that door. Without thinking, she walked over to it and reached for the handle. It resisted at first, as if it had been sealed shut by time, but with a little force, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. A musty smell wafted up from below, and the air was thick with dust. Emily hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she should leave, that this was none of her business, but something compelled her to go down. Maybe it was the note, Or maybe it was just her insatiable curiosity, but she couldn't turn back now. Grabbing her phone for light, she began descending the stairs, each step groaning under her weight. The air grew colder the further she went, and the darkness seemed to close in around her, thick and impenetrable. At the bottom of the stairs, she found herself in a small, windowless room. The walls were lined with old filing cabinets, and in the center of the room was a single wooden desk, covered in a thick layer of dust. Emily approached the desk cautiously, her flashlight sweeping across its surface. There, sitting in the middle of the desk, was another note, just like the one she had found upstairs. Her hand trembled as she reached for it, unfolding it carefully. The same shaky handwriting stared back at her. "They're watching. I can't escape." A sharp gasp escaped her lips, and she dropped the note as if it had burned her. This was no coincidence. Someone had been down here, someone desperate, someone trapped. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls too close, and a suffocating fear gripped her chest. She had to get out of here. But as she turned to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed behind her, soft and deliberate. Panic surged through her veins, and she spun around, her flashlight trembling in her hand. There was no one there, but the footsteps continued, growing closer, circling her. Her breath quickened, and she backed away toward the stairs, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. It had to be her imagination. But the footsteps, those steady, relentless footsteps, told her otherwise. "Help me," a voice whispered, so faint she almost didn't hear it. Her heart leaped into her throat, and she bolted up the stairs, her pulse pounding in her ears. She didn't stop until she reached the top, slamming the door shut behind her. Her breathing was ragged, her body trembling as she leaned against the door. For a long moment, she stood there in the dark, trying to calm her racing heart. But the fear clung to her, gnawing at the edges of her mind. Something was very wrong in this place, and whatever it wasn't going to let her go easily. Emily couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of dread that had settled in her chest after she escaped the hidden room. As she hurried out of the library, every sound, the soft echo of her footsteps, the faint creaking of the wooden floors, seemed amplified, haunting her with the memory of those invisible footsteps behind her. Outside, the cold evening air hit her face, but it did little to calm her nerves. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the quiet street. She glanced back at the library one last time before walking away, her mind racing with questions. What had she stumbled upon? The notes, the desperate pleas for help. They couldn't be a coincidence. Someone had been trapped down there, but who? And why hadn't anyone else found these messages before? That night, sleep didn't come easily. Emily tossed and turned in her bed, her mind replaying the events of the day. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the footsteps again, soft, deliberate, and unrelenting. The sound echoed in her mind, growing louder until she shot up in bed, drenched in sweat. Her apartment was silent, the only noise the distant hum of the city outside her window. But the quiet was oppressive, as if something was lurking just beyond the edge of her awareness. The next morning, Emily tried to distract herself with her routine, but the fear gnawed at her. The note she had found, "They're watching. I can't escape," kept flashing in her mind. She had brought both notes home with her, tucked away in the pages of one of her research books, but now the thought of them made her skin crawl. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened in that library wasn't over. And worst of all, she wasn't sure if it had followed her home. As she sat at her kitchen table, staring blankly at her laptop, she heard a soft creak behind her. Her heart skipped a beat. Slowly, she turned, but the room was empty. It was just the old building settling, she told herself. But the unease settled deeper into her bones. She had lived in this apartment for years, and she knew every sound it made. This was different. It was too deliberate, too slow, like the sound of someone carefully stepping across the floor. Pushing the thought from her mind, Emily forced herself to focus on her research. She had to figure out what was going on in that library. Maybe there was some record of strange occurrences, something that could explain the notes and the hidden room. She typed the name of the library into a search engine and began digging through old newspaper articles and local records. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It was just a small, forgotten library with a long history of neglect. But then she found something. An old article, buried in the archives of a local news site, caught her eye. The headline read, "Missing Girl Last Seen at City Library." The article was from over 30 years ago. According to the report, a young woman named Sarah Hargrove had disappeared without a trace after visiting the library to study. Friends reported that she had seemed on edge in the days leading up to her disappearance, claiming that she felt like she was being followed, though no one had believed her at the time. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she read the article. It couldn't be a coincidence. The description of Sarah's last known whereabouts matched the hidden room in the library. The article went on to say that despite a thorough investigation, no trace of Sarah had ever been found. The case had gone cold, and over the years, it had faded from memory. Her hands trembled as she clicked on the next link. Another article about the library, this one detailing a series of strange incidents that had occurred over the years. Several patrons had reported hearing whispers in the library when no one else was around. Others claimed to have seen fleeting shadows out of the corner of their eye, only for them to vanish when they turned to look. Some even mentioned finding notes, disturbing messages, much like the ones Emily had discovered. The more she read, the more convinced she became that something supernatural was happening in that library. And somehow, it was connected to Sarah Hargrove. Determined to learn more, Emily decided to visit the library again. She knew it was risky. Everything inside her screamed to stay away, but she couldn't ignore the pull of the mystery. She needed answers, and the only way to get them was to go back. But this time, she wouldn't go alone. She called her friend Alex, who had always been a skeptic when it came to anything paranormal. They had known each other since college, and though they were close, Alex often rolled his eyes at her fascination with ghost stories and urban legends. Still, Emily knew that if anyone would help her investigate the library, it would be him. After a brief explanation, and some convincing, Alex agreed to meet her at the library that evening. The sun was setting by the time they arrived, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement outside the building. Alex gave her a skeptical look as they stood outside the entrance, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. "So, you're telling me you found some creepy notes, and now you think the place is haunted?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Emily sighed. "I know it sounds crazy, but I'm telling you something is wrong in there. I found articles about a girl who disappeared years ago. I think she might have written those notes." Alex rolled his eyes, but followed her inside. The library was just as silent and eerie as it had been the day before. As they made their way toward the back, Emily felt the familiar chill settle over her. The sense of being watched returned, stronger this time, as if the building itself was aware of her presence. They reached the small door that led to the hidden room, and Alex gave her a dubious look. "This is the part where the horror movie music starts playing," he muttered. Emily ignored him and opened the door. The same narrow staircase stretched down into darkness, the musty smell wafting up to greet them. With a deep breath, she stepped onto the first stair, and Alex followed close behind. At the bottom, the room looked just as it had before, dusty, cramped, and unsettling. But something was different this time. As Emily swept her flashlight across the room, her beam landed on the desk, and her heart stopped. Another note. It was lying in the exact same spot as before, though she had taken the previous one with her. Slowly, she approached the desk and picked up the paper. The handwriting was the same shaky scrawl, but the message was different this time. "You can't hide from them." A cold shiver ran down her spine, and she turned to Alex, who was frowning at the note. "This is messed up," he muttered, "but it could just be someone messing with you." Emily wanted to believe him, but deep down, she knew that wasn't the case. Whoever, or whatever, had written these notes wasn't playing a game. They were trying to send a warning. Just then, a soft sound echoed through the room. It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and coming from above. The footsteps continued to echo above them, slow and rhythmic. Emily's heart raced, each beat pounding in her chest as she and Alex exchanged uneasy glances. The sound was unmistakable. Someone or something was up there. "I thought we were alone in here," Alex whispered, his skepticism wavering as his eyes darted toward the ceiling. "So did I," Emily replied, her voice barely audible. She could feel the tension building in the air, thick and suffocating. The room around them seemed to close in, the shadows deepening as the faint footsteps continued their steady march above their heads. Emily gripped the note tightly, her knuckles turning white. She could feel a chill creeping up her spine, the same eerie sensation she'd felt the first time she discovered the hidden room. Something was terribly wrong in this place, and it was only getting worse. "We need to get out of here," Alex muttered, his voice tight with unease. He took a step toward the stairs, but Emily didn't move. There was something holding her back, something tugging at the edges of her mind, urging her to stay. "No," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "We need to know what's going on. There's more to this." Alex shot her a look of disbelief, but he didn't argue. With a reluctant sigh, he nodded, and together they made their way back up the narrow staircase, each step creaking under their weight. The air grew colder as they ascended, and the faint sound of the footsteps seemed to grow louder, closer. When they reached the top, the library was as silent as ever. The bookshelves stood like silent sentinels in the dim light, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. Emily scanned the room, her eyes searching for any sign of movement, but there was nothing. The footsteps had stopped, leaving only an oppressive silence in their wake. "I don't like this," Alex whispered, his eyes darting around the room. Emily agreed, but she couldn't leave. Not yet. Something was drawing her deeper into the mystery, a force she couldn't explain. She felt it pulling at her, leading her towards something she couldn't yet see. As they moved through the library, Emily's thoughts returned to the articles she had read. The story of Sarah Hargrove, the missing girl, had struck a chord with her. It was as if Sarah's disappearance had left a mark on the library, a lingering presence that had yet to be resolved. And now, Emily was certain that the notes she had found were connected to Sarah. They wandered through the rows of dusty bookshelves, the silence around them broken only by the soft creak of the wooden floor beneath their feet. As they reached the far end of the library, Emily's attention was drawn to an old, worn photograph hanging on the wall. It was slightly crooked, the edges yellowed with age, but there was something about it that made her stop in her tracks. The photo depicted a group of people standing in front of the library, all smiling and dressed in formal clothing. The date at the bottom read 1953. Emily stepped closer, her eyes scanning the faces. Most of them were unfamiliar, but one caught her attention, a young woman standing off to the side, her expression distant and uneasy. It was Sarah Hargrove. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had seen Sarah's photograph in the article she had read, but here she was, standing among a group of people as if she had never disappeared. But something was off. The other people in the photo were smiling, but Sarah looked tense, almost frightened. "What is it?" Alex asked, noticing the look on Emily's face. "It's her," Emily whispered, pointing to the young woman in the photograph. "That's Sarah Hargrove, the girl who disappeared." Alex stepped closer, squinting at the photo. "Are you sure?" Emily nodded. "I'm positive, but this doesn't make sense. This photo is from 1953, and Sarah disappeared 30 years ago. She couldn't have been in this photo." Alex frowned, his skepticism returning. "Maybe it's just someone who looks like her." "No," Emily insisted. "It's her. I know it is." She stared at the photo, her mind racing. How could Sarah be in a photograph taken decades before she was born? And why did she look so frightened? Emily's thoughts swirled, each question leading to more confusion. Suddenly, a sharp noise shattered the silence, a loud, resounding bang that echoed through the library. Both Emily and Alex jumped, their hearts racing. "What the hell was that?" Alex hissed, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. They both turned toward the source of the sound, their eyes locking onto a door at the far end of the room. It was slightly ajar, the same door Emily had passed by on her first visit to the library, the one that led to the archives. Without thinking, Emily began moving toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Alex grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Are you crazy?" he whispered harshly. "We need to get out of here." But Emily shook her head. "We have to see what's in there." Reluctantly, Alex followed her as she pushed the door open and stepped into the dark, musty archive room. The air was thick with dust, and the dim light from the hallway barely illuminated the rows of shelves filled with old books and documents. As they ventured deeper into the room, Emily's eyes were drawn to a large, leather-bound book lying on a table in the center of the room. It was old, the cover worn and cracked with age, but the title was still visible: Library Records, 1950 to 1960. She reached out and opened the book, flipping through the yellowed pages. Her fingers trembled as she found what she was looking for: a record of the people who had worked at the library during that time period. Her heart stopped when she saw the name: Sarah Hargrove. "What the?" Alex breathed, staring at the name in disbelief. "How is that possible?" "I don't know," Emily whispered, her mind racing. "But it's her. She worked here decades before she disappeared." The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the picture they were forming was far more terrifying than Emily had anticipated. Sarah Hargrove hadn't just been a victim of some tragic disappearance. She had been part of the library's dark history all along. But the question remained: what had happened to her? And why had her name and her face been erased from time? As they stood there in the dimly lit archive room, the temperature suddenly dropped. Emily felt a cold breeze brush against her skin, and the oppressive feeling of being watched returned, stronger than ever. "We need to go," Alex whispered urgently, his breath visible in the freezing air. But before they could move, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening crash. The sound of the door slamming reverberated through the small, cramped archive room, sending shockwaves through Emily and Alex. Their eyes locked, both filled with fear, as the room grew eerily silent. The only sound now was their shallow breathing, as if the very air around them had thickened with tension. Emily's heart was pounding in her chest, but it wasn't just fear that she felt. It was something else, something colder, more malevolent. The oppressive sense of being watched had intensified, as if the very walls were closing in on them. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. They were trapped. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to find a way out." Alex nodded, his face pale and drawn. "But how?" "The door." Emily glanced at the door, now firmly shut as if it had never been opened. There was no visible lock, nothing that could have caused it to close so forcefully on its own. And yet, it had. A sense of dread washed over her. But she refused to give in to the terror bubbling beneath the surface. There had to be a way out, and they needed to find it before things got worse. She turned her attention back to the large leather-bound book on the table, the one that had listed Sarah Hargrove's name. Something about it had felt important, like a key to unlocking the truth. But now, staring down at the pages, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that it was also dangerous. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering over the brittle paper, but then she flipped back through the records. There was something else here, something she had missed. She was sure of it. Alex shifted nervously beside her, his eyes darting toward the door every few seconds as if expecting it to fly open, or worse. "What are you looking for?" he asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "I don't know yet," Emily admitted, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But there has to be more. Sarah Hargrove didn't just disappear, something happened to her. Something connected to this place." Her fingers moved rapidly over the pages, flipping through decades-old records of librarians, maintenance workers, and other staff who had been employed by the library. Each name felt like a piece of a puzzle she couldn't quite assemble. But then, her hand stopped on one entry, a name that made her blood run cold. Victor Hargrove. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The last name was the same, Hargrove. Could it be a coincidence? She doubted it. "Alex," she whispered, pointing to the name. "Look at this." Alex leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the entry. "Victor Hargrove, wait, isn't that Sarah's father?" Emily finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "He worked here too, decades before Sarah disappeared." The revelation hit her like a freight train. Sarah hadn't just vanished into thin air. Her family had deep ties to this library, ties that went back long before her disappearance. But what did it mean? And why had it been buried in these old records, forgotten like a dirty secret? Before Emily could voice her thoughts, a low, chilling sound filled the room. A whisper. Faint at first, but growing louder with each passing second. It seemed to come from all directions, swirling around them like a cold wind. But it wasn't just one voice. It was many, overlapping and distorted, speaking words she couldn't understand. Emily's body went rigid with fear, and she grabbed Alex's arm tightly. His eyes were wide, darting around the room as if trying to locate the source of the sound. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, his voice shaking. "I don't know," Emily whispered back, her heart racing. She could feel the cold creeping into her bones, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was as if the very air around them had come alive, charged with an unseen force. Suddenly, the whispering stopped. The silence that followed was even more unsettling, thick and oppressive, as though the room itself was holding its breath. Emily's skin prickled with unease, every instinct screaming at her to leave, to run far away from this place. But they were trapped. And then, without warning, the door creaked open. Emily and Alex both turned in unison, their bodies tensed as the heavy wooden door slowly swung inward. There was no one there, no person or thing that could have opened it. But something had. Emily could feel it, the presence that had been watching them since they entered the library, lurking just beyond the threshold. "Let's go," Alex whispered urgently, pulling on her arm. "Now!" Emily hesitated, her eyes still on the open door. But she knew Alex was right. They couldn't stay here any longer. Whatever was happening in this library, whatever dark force had been awakened, it was beyond their control. Together, they moved toward the door, their footsteps slow and cautious. Every creak of the floorboards beneath their feet seemed deafening in the oppressive silence, and Emily could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on them. But they had to keep going. They had to get out. As they stepped into the hallway beyond, Emily cast one last glance back at the archive room. The dim light flickered for a moment, casting long shadows on the walls. And then she saw it, just for a split second, a figure standing in the shadows at the far end of the room. A tall, dark silhouette, barely visible in the dim light. It was watching them. Emily's breath caught in her throat, and she felt her legs turn to jelly. She grabbed Alex's arm, pulling him with her as they broke into a run, the cold air of the library swirling around them. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows growing longer and darker with every step. They ran, their footsteps echoing through the silent library, until they burst through the front doors and into the cold night air. Outside, the world felt different, calmer, quieter, but the unease still lingered, like a shadow clinging to their every move. "Did you see that?" Emily gasped, her voice trembling as she turned to Alex. In the archive room, there was someone there. Alex's face was pale, his breathing labored as he nodded. "I saw it too." They stood there for a moment, catching their breath in the chilly night air. The library loomed behind them, dark and foreboding, its secrets locked away once more. But Emily knew they hadn't escaped it. Not really. Whatever they had awakened in that place, whatever dark force had been watching them, it wasn't over. It would follow them, haunt them, until the truth was fully uncovered. "Come on," Alex said finally, breaking the silence. "We need to figure out what's really going on here." Emily nodded, her mind racing with questions and fear. There was no turning back now. They were in too deep. The ride back to Emily's apartment was quiet, both of them lost in their thoughts. The coldness of the library still clung to them, and despite the warmth of the car's heater, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The figure in the archive room haunted her mind. Every time she blinked, she saw it, looming in the shadows, motionless but undeniably present. Do you think it followed us?" Alex finally asked, breaking the silence. His voice was barely audible, as if speaking louder would make their fears more real. Emily didn't respond right away. She stared out the window, watching the dark streets pass by in a blur. The city felt strangely empty, as if the rest of the world had slipped away, leaving only them to face the horrors they'd uncovered. "I don't know," she finally whispered. "But it's not over, Alex. Whatever that thing was, it's tied to Sarah, and we need to find out why." When they reached her apartment, the sense of unease still hadn't lifted. Emily fumbled with her keys, her hands trembling, and Alex kept glancing over his shoulder, as though expecting the shadowy figure to materialize behind them. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Emily dropped her bag on the kitchen counter, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of everything. The records, Sarah's disappearance, Victor Hargrove's connection to the library. None of it made any sense. But there was one thing she was sure of. Whatever had happened to Sarah was far darker than they had imagined. "Do you still have that book?" Alex asked, his voice breaking the heavy silence. Emily nodded, reaching into her bag and pulling out the old leather-bound tome they had taken from the archive room. The book felt heavier in her hands than it had before, as though it carried the weight of the secrets it contained. She flipped through the pages once more, her eyes scanning the names and dates, searching for something, anything, that could offer a clue. And then she saw it, a small note, scribbled in the margins of one of the final entries, barely legible but unmistakably there. "Sarah is not the first, and she will not be the last." Emily's blood ran cold. The note was written in shaky, hurried handwriting, as though the person who had written it had been afraid, terrified, even. Her heart raced as she traced the words with her finger, the implications sinking in like a heavy stone. "Look at this," she said, turning the book toward Alex. He leaned in, his brow furrowing as he read the note. "What does that mean? Sarah isn't the first?" Emily swallowed hard, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to click into place. "It means this has happened before. Other people have disappeared. And whatever is haunting that library, whatever's tied to Sarah, it's been there for a long time." Alex's face went pale. "You're saying this thing has been taking people? For how long?" "I don't know," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "But we need to find out. We need to figure out who wrote this note, and what they knew about Sarah and the others." Her mind raced as she considered their next move. The library had been hiding these secrets for years, and the truth had been buried deep, but someone had known. Someone had tried to warn them, tried to leave a clue, and now it was up to them to uncover the rest of the story. As they pored over the book, tracing the names and dates, a pattern began to emerge. Every few decades, someone had disappeared, just like Sarah, and every time, their connection to the library had been erased, their names forgotten, their stories lost. But the one constant in all of it was Victor Hargrove. His name appeared again and again in the records, always in the background, always lurking on the edges of the story. It was as if he had been watching, waiting, orchestrating something far darker than anyone had realized. "Victor," Emily whispered, the name sending a chill down her spine. "It's all connected to him." Alex frowned, his eyes scanning the pages. "But he's dead, right? He couldn't have been behind all of this." Emily shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe it's not him, but something connected to him. His legacy, his presence. Whatever it is, it's still here, and it's still taking people." A sudden knock on the door startled them both, sending a jolt of fear through the air. Emily froze, her heart racing, as Alex slowly moved toward the door, his hand trembling as he reached for the knob. "Who is it?" Alex called, his voice tight with fear. There was no answer, just silence. He glanced back at Emily, and she shook her head, motioning for him to stay back. She approached the door cautiously, her hand gripping the handle as she pressed her ear against the wood. For a moment, all she could hear was the sound of her own breathing, rapid and uneven. And then, just as she was about to pull away, she heard it, a soft, desperate whisper. "Help me." Emily's blood turned to ice. The voice was faint, almost too quiet to hear, but unmistakably there. She stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest, as the weight of the situation crashed down on her. "That voice," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "It's Sarah." Alex's face went pale, his eyes darting to the door. "What do we do?" Emily swallowed hard, every instinct telling her to run, to leave, to never look back. But she couldn't. Not now. Not after everything they had uncovered. Sarah needed their help, and whatever was haunting the library, whatever had been taking people for decades, it was still out there. "We need to go back," Emily said, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her veins. "We need to finish this. We need to help her." Alex hesitated for a moment, his face filled with uncertainty, but then he nodded. "Okay, let's end this." Together, they gathered their things, the weight of the book heavy in Emily's bag as they prepared to face the darkness once more. The night air was cold as they stepped out into the street, the shadows long and foreboding, but they knew there was no turning back now. The library loomed ahead, dark and silent, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. And as they approached the front doors, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this time, they wouldn't be leaving empty-handed. This time, they would be facing the forgotten cry for help head-on. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The air was thick with the scent of dust and old wood as Emily unlocked the door to her late grandfather's house. She hesitated for a moment, the key heavy in her hand, before pushing the door open. A wave of nostalgia hit her immediately. This was the house she had spent so many summers in as a child, running through the halls, hiding behind furniture, and exploring every nook and cranny. But now it felt different. The once warm and inviting home seemed hollow, as if the years of silence had drained it of its life. Emily stepped inside, the creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet echoing through the empty hallways. She glanced around, taking in the familiar sights. The grandfather clock ticking in the corner, the old armchair by the fireplace, the shelves lined with books she had never read. Everything was exactly as she remembered, yet the house felt foreign, as though it belonged to someone else now. Her grandfather had passed away a few months ago, leaving behind this house and a lifetime of memories she wasn't sure she was ready to face. She had been avoiding this moment, delaying her return to the house for as long as possible, but the time had come. The estate needed to be sorted, and Emily was the only family left to do it. With a deep breath, she moved deeper into the house, her footsteps stirring up faint clouds of dust as she went. The rooms were all in disarray, as if time had frozen the moment her grandfather had left. His personal belongings were scattered across tables and shelves, stacks of old papers and letters piled high, and drawers left half open. It was as if he had known he wouldn't be coming back. Emily walked into the living room, her eyes drawn to the large portrait of her grandfather that hung over the fireplace. His stern yet kind face watched over the room, his eyes seeming to follow her every move. She had always been close to him, but there had been something about him, something mysterious, that she could never quite figure out. He was a man of few words, always keeping to himself, and there were stories about his past that he had never shared. She approached the portrait, her fingers brushing the edge of the frame as memories of their time together flooded her mind. Summers spent sitting on the porch, listening to him tell stories of the war and the old country. Afternoons spent in his study while he read old, tattered books, and the strange, secretive smile he always wore when she asked too many questions about his life. But now, as she stood in his house alone, Emily realized how little she truly knew about him. She had always been curious about his past, but he had been a private man, and now that he was gone, there were questions she would never get answers to. Or so she thought. The creak of the floorboards upstairs snapped her out of her thoughts, and Emily turned her head toward the staircase at the far end of the room. She frowned. The house was supposed to be empty, and the idea of someone, or something, being upstairs sent a chill down her spine. "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing through the quiet house. There was no answer. With a mixture of hesitation and curiosity, Emily made her way toward the staircase, her heart pounding in her chest. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking beneath her weight. The upstairs hallway was dark, the curtains drawn tight, and the air felt thick with a sense of anticipation. As she reached the top of the stairs, she noticed something odd. The door to her grandfather's study, the room he had always kept locked, was slightly ajar. Her breath caught in her throat. That door had never been open. Her grandfather had been adamant that no one enter that room, and she had never questioned it. But now, standing before it, Emily felt an overwhelming urge to see what was inside. She pushed the door open, and the musty scent of old books and leather hit her immediately. The room was exactly as she had imagined it, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a large oak desk in the center, and papers strewn across every available surface. But what caught her eye wasn't the mess of books or the stacks of yellowed papers. It was the small wooden box sitting on the desk, partially hidden beneath a pile of letters. Emily approached the desk slowly, her fingers brushing against the rough surface of the box. It was unassuming, just an old, worn-out piece of wood, no larger than a shoebox. But something about it felt important. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should leave it alone, but the curiosity was too strong. She had to know what was inside. She lifted the lid carefully, and her heart skipped a beat. Inside were several strange, old objects, things she had never seen before. There was an old brass key, a faded photograph of her grandfather standing with a group of men she didn't recognize, and a small, tattered journal. Emily's hands trembled as she picked up the journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. Flipping it open, she found pages filled with her grandfather's neat, cursive handwriting. But as she read the first few lines, her stomach twisted in knots. The words were not the ramblings of a man reminiscing about his life. They were notes, cryptic messages about things he had seen, places he had been, and people he had encountered. People who weren't supposed to exist. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she realized what she was holding. This wasn't just a journal. It was a record of secrets, of things her grandfather had kept hidden for decades. And as she read further, it became clear that he had been involved in something far darker than she had ever imagined. Suddenly, the house didn't feel so empty anymore. The creak of floorboards behind her made her freeze, and she slowly turned around, her heart pounding in her chest. The hallway outside the study was dark, but she could sense something, or someone, standing just out of sight. Her fingers tightened around the journal, and she took a deep breath. "Who's there?" she called, her voice barely a whisper. There was no answer, just the sound of footsteps slowly retreating down the hall. Emily stood there for a moment, her mind racing. The house, her grandfather's secrets, the strange objects in the box. It was all too much to process. But one thing was clear, she was no longer alone in this house. And whatever, or whoever, was there with her, didn't want her to leave. Emily stood frozen in the doorway of the study, the journal clutched tightly in her hands. The sound of retreating footsteps faded into the stillness of the house, leaving behind an eerie silence that seemed to seep into every corner of the room. She wanted to believe it was just her imagination, that her mind was playing tricks on her after discovering the strange contents of her grandfather's journal. But deep down, she knew that wasn't the case. Slowly, she stepped out of the study and into the dark hallway, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The air felt heavier now, thick with a palpable tension that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She could feel it. Something was watching her. But from where? And why? As she stood there, trying to make sense of it all, her gaze drifted back to the journal in her hands. The cryptic notes, the strange entries. There had to be more to it. If her grandfather had gone to such great lengths to keep this hidden, then the answer she sought might be buried within these pages. Emily returned to the study and shut the door behind her, hoping to lock out whatever presence lurked in the house. She sat down at the large oak desk, the journal open in front of her, and began reading again. The entries were fragmented, some written in a hurried, almost frantic hand. Many of them were dated, though the dates stretched back further than she had expected, decades in fact. As she read, it became clear that her grandfather had been documenting events, moments in time that he had kept hidden from the rest of the family. One of the earliest entries was from 1954. "I found the house again today. It's been decades since I last saw it, but it hasn't changed a bit. I don't know how that's possible, how a place could remain untouched by time. But there it was just as I left it. The others told me to leave it alone, that nothing good could come from revisiting the past. But I can't help myself. There's something about that place, something that calls to me. I feel it in my bones. I must go back." Emily frowned, her fingers tracing the faded ink. The house? Was he talking about this house? Or somewhere else? She flipped through more pages, scanning for any mention of a location, but there were none. However, as she read on, it became clear that whatever this place was, her grandfather had become obsessed with it. He mentioned the others frequently, though he never named them. They seemed to be a group he had once been a part of, but who had abandoned him when he became too fixated on whatever mystery he was trying to solve. Another entry, dated 1961, caught her eye. "They told me I was mad, that I should forget about it and move on. But how can I? Every night I dream of it, and every day I feel its pull. I returned again today, and this time I found something. The key. It was just as I remembered, hidden beneath the floorboards, waiting for me. I'm so close now, so close to unlocking its secrets. But I must be careful. There are eyes watching me. I can feel them. They don't want me to succeed. The key. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she glanced at the small brass key that had been hidden in the box. Could this be the same one her grandfather had written about? What door had it been meant to open, and what secrets had it been guarding? Her mind raced with possibilities, but before she could dive deeper into the journal, a soft thud echoed through the house. Emily's head snapped up, her pulse quickening. The sound had come from downstairs. She stood up from the desk, clutching the key and the journal to her chest, and slowly made her way out of the study. The house was silent again, but the sense of being watched hadn't left. She descended the stairs cautiously, her heart pounding in her ears. Every creak of the floorboards beneath her feet felt like a thunderclap in the quiet house. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she noticed something strange. The door to the basement, one she had never seen her grandfather open in all the years she had visited, was slightly ajar. A faint draft wafted from the crack in the door, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else she couldn't quite place. Emily hesitated, her hand hovering over the door handle. She had never been down there before. Her grandfather had always been adamant that the basement was off limits, a place no one should ever go. But now, with the journal in hand and the key burning a hole in her pocket, she couldn't ignore the gnawing curiosity that urged her forward. She pushed the door open and peered into the darkness below. A narrow staircase led down into the basement, the wooden steps creaking under her weight as she descended. The air grew colder with each step, and the musty scent of the basement grew stronger. When she reached the bottom, Emily flicked the light switch, but nothing happened. The bulb must have burned out long ago. She fumbled in her pocket for her phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the space. The basement was cluttered with old furniture, stacks of boxes, and various tools her grandfather had used over the years. But it was the far corner of the room that caught her attention. There, tucked away behind a pile of old crates, was a door. It was small, almost hidden, as though someone had deliberately tried to keep it out of sight. Emily's pulse quickened. The key. Could this be what her grandfather had been hiding? She approached the door slowly, her hand trembling as she pulled the brass key from her pocket. It fit perfectly into the lock, and with a soft click, the door swung open. What she saw inside made her blood run cold. The room beyond was unlike anything she had expected. It was small, barely large enough to stand in, and the walls were lined with strange symbols, painted in a dark, almost black substance. In the center of the room sat a single object, a large, ornate mirror. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stepped closer to the mirror, her reflection staring back at her from the dim light of her phone. But there was something off about the reflection. It wasn't just her. There was something else, something moving in the shadows behind her. Before she could react, the door behind her slammed shut. Emily's heart raced as the sound of the slamming door echoed through the tiny, hidden room. She spun around, her flashlight beam casting frantic arcs across the walls, but the door was firmly shut, trapping her inside. The oppressive darkness of the room pressed in on her, and that eerie feeling of being watched crept over her once again. She turned back toward the mirror, her pulse hammering in her ears, and this time, she saw it clearly. Behind her reflection in the mirror, there was a figure, shadowy, indistinct but undeniably human in shape. It stood still for a moment, just watching her, before slowly beginning to move closer. The figure didn't seem to walk. It glided, its dark form slipping through the reflection like a wisp of smoke. Emily's breath caught in her throat, her entire body frozen with fear. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet, her skin prickling with the cold. Her reflection stayed rooted to the spot, even as the figure behind her continued its slow, deliberate approach. "Get a grip," she muttered under her breath, but her voice was shaky. She tried to convince herself that this was some trick, that the mirror was somehow distorting her perception. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Summoning every ounce of courage she had left, Emily took a slow step backward, her hand reaching for the door. Her fingers found the cold metal knob, but when she twisted it, it wouldn't budge. Panic began to claw at her as she turned her full attention back to the mirror. The shadow figure was closer now, almost directly behind her reflection, and for the first time, she could make out its features, or rather, the lack of them. The figure had no face, no discernible eyes, mouth, or nose. It was just a void, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to shift and pulse, growing more menacing with every passing second. Instinctively, Emily turned around, expecting to see the figure standing behind her in the flesh, but the room was empty. No one was there, just the musty smell of the basement and the eerie quiet that now felt suffocating. She whipped back to the mirror, and the figure was gone. Her reflection stood alone once more, but the oppressive weight in the air told her it hadn't truly left. It was here, somewhere watching her. Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and a faint whisper brushed against her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. It was faint, barely audible, but the words were unmistakable. "You shouldn't be here." Emily stumbled backward, her flashlight flickering wildly. The cold grew more intense, and the whispers came again, this time louder. Multiple voices, murmuring just out of reach, filling the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. With a surge of desperation, she pounded on the door, trying to force it open. It rattled in its frame, but still, it wouldn't give. Panic surged in her chest. She couldn't stay here. Something was coming, something far worse than the faceless shadow. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. She pulled it out with trembling hands, her thumbs swiping at the screen. It was a message. No, several messages, all from a number she didn't recognize. The latest one flashed on her screen. "You're in danger. Leave now." Her eyes widened as she stared at the message, her mind racing. Who could have sent this? And how could they know where she was? The basement had no reception. There was no way she should have been able to receive any text down here. Before she could respond, another message popped up. "It's watching you." Emily's breath hitched as she glanced around the room, half expecting the shadowy figure to materialize from the walls. Her mind was in a whirl of confusion and terror, but one thing was clear. She needed to get out. Frantic now, she turned back to the mirror, searching for any sign of the figure. Her reflection stared back at her, wide-eyed and pale. But something wasn't right. Her reflection wasn't matching her movements. While she stood frozen, the image in the mirror slowly raised its hand, its eyes fixed on something behind her. Emily's blood ran cold. With every ounce of strength she had left, she turned and slammed her shoulder against the door. The wood creaked but didn't give. Desperation clawed at her, and she threw herself against it again and again, the whispers growing louder, the cold biting deeper into her skin. Finally, with a loud crack, the door gave way, and she stumbled out into the basement. Gasping for air, she darted up the stairs, her legs trembling beneath her. She didn't stop until she reached the main floor, the oppressive weight of the basement still clinging to her like a shroud. For a moment, she stood in the hallway, her chest heaving as she tried to collect herself. Her phone buzzed again in her hand, and she glanced down at it. Get out. Emily didn't need any more convincing. Whatever was in this house, whatever her grandfather had been hiding, it was beyond her comprehension, and she had no intention of finding out more. She grabbed her coat and bolted for the front door, throwing it open with trembling hands. The cold night air hit her like a wave, but it was a relief compared to the stifling presence inside the house. She ran to her car, not looking back, her heart pounding in her chest. As she drove away, the house growing smaller in the rearview mirror, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The whispers still echoed faintly in her mind, and her reflection's warning played on a loop in her head. But just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief, her phone buzzed one last time. She glanced at the screen, her stomach lurching. It was a photo of her, standing in the basement, staring into the mirror. And behind her, the shadowy figure loomed closer. The cold night air rushing through the cracked window did little to calm Emily's frantic mind. The photo on her phone felt like a weight in her hand, every nerve screaming that something was terribly wrong. She tried to focus on the road, but her mind kept looping back to the reflection, the faceless shadow, and the message that haunted her thoughts. It's watching you. She pulled over to the side of the road, her heart still racing. The trees around her were tall and foreboding, their branches swaying gently in the wind. Emily took a few deep breaths, trying to steady herself, but the fear gnawed at her insides. She didn't know where to go, Driving aimlessly into the night wouldn't save her from whatever this was. She needed answers. Grabbing her phone, she swiped back to the mysterious number that had sent the messages. Her thumb hovered over the call button, unsure of what to expect. Would someone pick up? Was this some kind of twisted joke? But before she could press it, another message flashed across her screen. "He's still with you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her blood ran cold. The road around her was dark, empty. There was no one here but her. She locked the car doors instinctively, her eyes darting around for any sign of movement. But the shadows outside were still, and nothing seemed out of place. Yet the overwhelming feeling of being watched settled back over her, heavier than before. Her hands trembled as she typed back a response. "Who are you? What do you mean?" The reply came almost instantly, the words lighting up her screen like a warning flare in the dark. "Get rid of the mirror. It's a portal. He's using it to follow you." Emily stared at the message, her heart thudding so loud she could barely think. A portal? The idea was absurd. Mirrors didn't act as gateways for malevolent spirits or faceless figures from another world. But after everything she had experienced, she wasn't sure what to believe anymore. She thought back to the mirror in her grandfather's basement, the one that seemed to trap her reflection in some sinister loop, the one that held the shadowy figure within its glassy surface. A portal. The idea chilled her to the core, but it made sense. The figure had appeared in the mirror first, its presence tied to that ancient, dusty piece of furniture. Her phone buzzed again. "You have to destroy it, or he'll never stop." Emily swallowed hard. She couldn't go back there. Could she? The thought of returning to her grandfather's house, with its cold, oppressive air and the shadow figure lurking in the corners of her mind, was terrifying. But what choice did she have? If this thing was following her, if it had come through the mirror, there was no escaping it. Not unless she did something about it. Steeling herself, Emily shifted the car back into gear. The road leading back to her grandfather's house was dark, the trees casting long shadows across the pavement. But she drove on, her fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. She had to end this. When she pulled into the driveway, the house loomed in front of her, silent and foreboding. The lights from her car cast eerie shadows across the old, weathered porch, and for a moment, Emily hesitated. She could feel it, the presence inside, waiting for her. The thought of stepping back into that basement sent a chill through her bones. But she forced herself out of the car, her feet moving on autopilot as she approached the door. It creaked open with a loud groan, and the cold air of the house greeted her like a physical force. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around and leave. But she pressed on, her flashlight cutting through the dim hallway as she made her way to the basement stairs. The door to the basement was ajar, as if it had been waiting for her return. With a shaky breath, she descended the stairs, each creak of the wooden steps echoing in the stillness. The air down here was thick, heavy with the scent of dust, and something else she couldn't quite place. The oppressive cold seemed to close in around her. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, the mirror was right where she had left it. The large, ornate frame gleamed faintly in the dim light, and her reflection stood frozen within it, staring back at her with wide, fearful eyes. But this time, there was no shadow figure in the background. The reflection was alone. She approached cautiously, her breath visible in the cold air. The mirror's surface seemed to ripple as she got closer, like water disturbed by an unseen current. Emily's heart hammered in her chest, her skin crawling with dread. She reached out to touch the frame, her fingers grazing the cold metal. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, the surface of the mirror began to darken, shadows swirling just beneath the glass. Her reflection twisted, warping into something unrecognizable, a twisted version of herself, with hollow eyes and a sinister grin. Emily recoiled, but her reflection didn't retreat. It stood there, grinning that terrible, soulless grin, while the shadows inside the mirror churned violently. And then, the whispers returned. "You can't escape." The voice echoed inside her mind, filling the room with its malevolent presence. Emily stumbled backward, her eyes wide with terror as the figure in the mirror began to move. Slowly, it stepped out of the shadows, emerging from the depths of the mirror's surface. Its faceless form was clearer now, more defined, and as it moved toward the glass, Emily realized with horror that it was trying to cross over. She had to stop it. She had to destroy the mirror before it was too late. In a frenzy, she grabbed the nearest object she could find, a rusted metal pipe, and swung it at the mirror with all her strength. The glass shattered on impact, shards flying across the room. The figure recoiled, its form distorting as the mirror broke into pieces. But the whispers didn't stop. The shadows didn't disappear. Emily's phone buzzed again. Trembling, she glanced at the screen. It's not over. Before she could react, the air around her seemed to grow impossibly cold. The shattered pieces of the mirror on the floor began to move, as if pulled by an unseen force. They swirled together, forming a dark vortex in the center of the room. And from within that vortex, the faceless figure began to rise again. This time, it wasn't trapped behind glass. It was free. Emily's legs felt like lead as she stood frozen in place, watching the figure rise from the vortex of shattered glass. It no longer had the eerie distortion of a reflection, no longer seemed tethered to the mirror. It was real, stepping into her world. The faceless figure was more terrifying now, its movements slow, deliberate, and utterly inhuman. The weight of its presence made the air thick, suffocating, like it was swallowing the very space around her. Panic surged through her veins, but Emily knew she couldn't freeze. She couldn't let it take her. Her mind raced for a solution, any way to stop the figure before it was too late. The pipe in her hand felt useless now. Smashing the mirror hadn't worked, and it was clear that physical force wasn't enough. The figure's head tilted in her direction, as if acknowledging her presence, though its blank face showed no emotion. Slowly, it took another step forward, its long, shadowy fingers stretching toward her. Emily backed away, her heart pounding in her chest, trying to think through the fear. She couldn't fight it, but maybe she could trap it again. Her eyes darted around the basement. There had to be something, some way to contain the entity, just like it had been trapped in the mirror. The thought struck her like a bolt of lightning. If the mirror was a portal, then perhaps it wasn't just a random object. Perhaps it was part of something bigger, something that could seal this thing away again. Emily's mind snapped back to her grandfather. He had always been secretive, his collection of strange artifacts a source of fascination and confusion for her growing up. The mirror had always been one of the more unusual pieces. But what if there was more to it? What if the key to stopping this thing was hidden somewhere else in the house? Without wasting another second, she bolted up the stairs, the faceless figure following behind her, its steps slow but inevitable. It was like it had all the time in the world, while she had none. The moment she burst into the main floor of the house, Emily's eyes scanned the room. Her grandfather's study. That was where he kept his most precious and most dangerous belongings. She sprinted toward the door, her breath coming in ragged gasps as the chill of the figure's presence followed her through the house. The door to the study was locked. Emily cursed under her breath, frantically fumbling for the keys she had found in the house earlier. Her hands trembled as she shoved the key into the lock, twisting it open just as the air behind her grew colder. She could feel the figure drawing nearer, its silent approach filling her with dread. She threw open the door and slammed it behind her, locking it again for whatever little good that would do. The study was dimly lit by the moonlight streaming through the window, casting long shadows across the room. Her grandfather's collection of artifacts lined the shelves, old books, strange statues, and ancient relics from around the world. Her eyes fell on a dusty old journal lying on the desk, its pages yellowed with age. She grabbed it, flipping through the pages desperately. There, near the middle of the book, was a drawing of the mirror, alongside a description that sent a shiver down her spine. The mirror was part of an ancient ritual, a tool used by a secret order to trap entities from another realm. It wasn't just a mirror, it was a prison. The words on the page were cryptic, but they mentioned one thing that stood out: a binding spell. Emily's eyes widened as she read further. The spell was designed to seal an entity away, to prevent it from crossing into the physical world. But the catch was that it had to be performed by someone who could hold the entity's gaze, someone strong enough to withstand the terror it invoked. The figure was pounding on the door now, the wood creaking under the force of its blows. Emily's time was running out. Her breath quickened as she read through the ritual, committing the steps to memory. She needed three things: a reflective surface, a binding object, and her own willpower to finish the spell. The mirror was shattered, but there were still shards of it scattered in the basement. That would have to do. Grabbing an old silver locket from her grandfather's collection, which was mentioned in the journal as a talisman used to focus the binding energy, she raced back out of the study, her heart pounding. The door gave way behind her as she darted down the hall, the faceless figure emerging from the shadows, its hand outstretched toward her. It was faster now, more determined. Emily barely made it to the basement stairs, practically throwing herself down the steps. She skidded to a stop in front of the shattered mirror, grabbing the largest shard she could find. It was sharp, cutting into her palm as she lifted it, but she barely noticed the pain. The figure was at the bottom of the stairs now, its blank face somehow more menacing without features. Emily's hands shook as she clutched the shard and the locket, her mind racing as she began to recite the words from the journal. The air in the basement grew colder, thicker, as the figure drew closer. Emily's breath fogged in front of her as she spoke the words, her voice trembling but steady. The figure hesitated, as if sensing what she was doing, but it didn't stop. Its long fingers reached out for her, just inches away. The shard in her hand began to glow faintly, the reflective surface catching the dim light of the room. The locket in her other hand grew warm, pulsing with energy. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, focusing on the words, on the spell, on the image of the figure being trapped once more. Suddenly, the figure let out a low, guttural sound. Its first noise, a deep, rumbling growl that seemed to reverberate through the entire house. The shadows around it began to twist and writhe, as if being pulled toward the shard in Emily's hand. She could feel the weight of its gaze, even though it had no eyes. It was as if the figure was staring into her very soul, trying to break her concentration, trying to make her falter. But Emily didn't stop. She couldn't stop. With a final, desperate shout, she spoke the last word of the spell, thrusting the shard toward the figure. The air around them seemed to crackle with energy, the shadows pulling tighter around the figure's form. For a moment, everything was still, and then, with a deafening roar, the figure was sucked back into the shard, its form twisting and collapsing into itself. The shard in Emily's hand glowed bright for a second before the light faded, leaving only the cold, empty basement around her. The silence was deafening. Emily collapsed to the floor, the shard falling from her hand. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her body trembling with exhaustion. The figure was gone, the mirror was broken, and for the first time since all of this had started, she felt like she could breathe again. She sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the broken shards of the mirror. It was over. She had won. Her phone buzzed once more. With shaking hands, she picked it up, dreading what she might see. But this time, the message was different. You did it. A weak smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She had done it. She had stopped the nightmare. As she stood to leave, she glanced at the locket in her hand. Her grandfather had always been full of secrets. Maybe it was time she learned the rest of them. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floors of the old Collins family home. The house, with its peeling paint and ivy creeping up the sides, had seen better days, much like its inhabitants. Within its walls, a sense of unease lingered, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. This was the home of Jonathan Collins, a man in his 30s who had recently returned to his childhood abode after the sudden disappearance of his younger sister, Lily. Lily had always been the vibrant heart of the family, a free spirit with a smile that could light up the darkest room. But 2 months ago, she had gone missing without a trace. One day, she was there, filled with laughter and plans for the future, and the next, she was gone. Her absence left a gaping hole in the lives of those who loved her, especially Jonathan. Guilt gnawed at him, a constant reminder of the times he had taken her for granted. As Jonathan paced through the dimly lit hallway, his thoughts wandered to that fateful day. It had started like any other, with Lily humming a tune as she prepared for a hiking trip in the nearby woods. She had been excited, eager to explore the trails that twisted through the towering pines. "I'll be back before dinner," she had said, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Those words echoed in his mind, taunting him with their finality. He remembered the phone call he had received later that day, a frantic message from a friend who had been with Lily on the hike. She just disappeared, John. 1 minute she was there, and the next she was gone. We searched everywhere. The friend's voice trembled with fear, and Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. The days that followed were a blur of searches, police reports, and sleepless nights filled with worry. Now, standing in the family home, he could almost feel Lily's presence, like a ghost lingering just out of reach. The family had gathered for a meeting, an attempt to confront the reality of their loss. In the living room, his parents sat in silence, their faces etched with worry. His father, Robert Collins, was a stern man, his emotions buried beneath layers of stoicism. Next to him was Clara, his mother, whose eyes were puffy and red from crying. "Jonathan," Robert said, breaking the silence, "we need to talk about what's next. We can't keep waiting for her to come back." His voice was heavy with unspoken grief, but Jonathan felt a surge of defiance. "No, we can't just give up. She's out there, and we need to keep searching." Clara reached for her husband's hand, squeezing it tightly as she turned to Jonathan. "We understand, honey, but the police have already searched the area. They found nothing." Jonathan couldn't accept that. As the days turned into weeks, the hope of finding Lily alive began to fade, but Jonathan refused to let go. There had to be something, some clue or sign that would lead him to her. Determined to find answers, he decided to revisit the last place Lily had been seen, the hiking trail. Perhaps he had missed something during the initial search, something that would unravel the mystery of her disappearance. He grabbed his jacket and headed out, the autumn air crisp against his skin. The woods loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, as he stepped onto the familiar path. Each footfall echoed the weight of his sorrow, but he pressed on, driven by a fierce need to uncover the truth. As he walked deeper into the woods, memories flooded his mind. Hiking with Lily as kids, her laughter ringing through the trees, the secrets they had shared. But now, an oppressive silence enveloped him. The air felt thick with unspoken fears, and shadows danced between the trees, twisting and turning in ways that made his heart race. After hours of searching, Jonathan stumbled upon a clearing that felt eerily different. It was a place he recognized, but something felt off. The trees seemed denser here, their trunks gnarled and twisted as if they were guarding a dark secret. He knelt down, examining the ground, searching for any sign of Lily. And then he saw it, a small silver locket half buried in the dirt. It was unmistakably Lily's. His heart raced as he picked it up, brushing off the dirt. The locket had been a gift from their grandmother, something Lily had cherished deeply. A wave of panic washed over him. "What does this mean?" he whispered, looking around as if the trees might answer him. A sense of dread settled in his gut as he felt the weight of the woods pressing in around him. With the locket clutched tightly in his hand, Jonathan realized he was no longer just searching for his sister. He was on the brink of uncovering something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. The locket felt like a heavy anchor in Jonathan's pocket as he left the woods, the weight of it symbolizing the truth he was beginning to uncover. With each step away from the clearing, his mind raced with questions. How had it ended up here? What had really happened to Lily? The air around him felt charged, as if the very forest was alive with secrets, whispering hints he could almost grasp, but never fully understand. Back home, the sun was setting, casting an orange glow through the windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced lazily in the air. Jonathan sat at the kitchen table, the locket resting in front of him. His parents were seated across from him, their faces drawn with concern. Clara poured herself a cup of tea, her hands trembling slightly. "Did you find anything, Jonathan?" she asked, her voice laced with hope yet tinged with despair. He hesitated, feeling the weight of the locket's presence between them. "I found her locket. It was in the woods, near the last place she was seen." He placed it on the table gently, as if it were a fragile thing that might shatter under scrutiny. Clara gasped, reaching for it. "Oh, my sweet girl," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Robert, however, remained stoic, his gaze piercing as he studied Jonathan. "What does this mean?" he asked, his tone a mixture of urgency and fear. "I don't know," Jonathan admitted, feeling the pressure of their expectations. "But I think we need to look deeper into what happened that day. There must be someone who saw her, something that happened we don't know about." As the evening wore on, they pored over maps and old photographs, Jonathan trying to recall every detail of Lily's last known whereabouts. The walls of their home felt suffocating, filled with memories of laughter that now seemed tainted by the tragedy. Each photo brought forth bittersweet nostalgia, Lily's bright smile, the carefree moments frozen in time. With a determined spark igniting within him, Jonathan decided to reach out to Lily's friends. He started with her best friend, Emily, who had been with Lily the day she vanished. They had shared countless secrets and adventures, and Jonathan hoped Emily might hold a piece of the puzzle that could lead him closer to finding his sister. The next morning, he dialed Emily's number, his heart pounding with anxiety. After a few rings, she answered, her voice shaky. "Jonathan, I didn't expect to hear from you." "Hey, Emily, I found something, Lily's locket. It was in the woods. I was wondering if we could meet and talk about that day." There was a long pause on the other end, and Jonathan could hear the faint sound of her breath hitching. "Yeah, sure. I'd like that. I've been thinking about her a lot. Let's meet at the cafe in an hour." As he hung up, a mixture of hope and dread coursed through him. Would Emily provide the clarity he desperately sought, or would her memories only deepen his despair? He knew he had to face whatever truths lay ahead, no matter how painful. Arriving at the cafe, Jonathan found Emily already seated at a corner table, her fingers nervously fidgeting with her coffee cup. She looked up as he approached, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, Jonathan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for meeting me," he replied, sliding into the seat across from her. "I just need to understand what happened that day. I feel like there's something we missed." Emily took a deep breath, her eyes searching his. "Lily was excited, you know? She had this adventurous spirit. We were hiking along the trail, talking and laughing. Everything was fine until we reached the clearing." The mention of the clearing sent a chill down Jonathan's spine. "What happened in the clearing?" he urged, leaning forward, his heart racing. Emily looked away, her gaze fixed on the window as if searching for answers in the bustling street outside. "We heard something, a sound like a voice calling her name. I thought it was just the wind, but Lily seemed drawn to it. She said she wanted to investigate. I didn't want her to go alone, but she insisted she would be right back." Jonathan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "And then? What happened next?" I waited for what felt like forever, but she never came back. I looked for her, calling her name, but there was nothing. Just silence. Silence. The very word echoed in Jonathan's mind, a painful reminder of the void Lily had left behind. "Did you notice anything unusual? Anyone else around?" Emily shook her head, frustration evident in her features. "No, it was just the two of us. But there was something strange about that place. It felt wrong, like we were being watched." Jonathan's pulse quickened. "Watched?" "Yes," she whispered. "I felt it too. A sense that we were intruding, like the woods wanted us to leave." The conversation hung heavy between them, the air thick with unspoken fears. Jonathan's thoughts raced, connecting the dots between the locket, the clearing, and Emily's recollections. It was as if a veil was slowly being lifted, revealing shadows lurking just beyond his sight. "Emily, do you remember if Lily mentioned anything specific before she left?" he pressed, desperate for any clue that could lead him closer to the truth. She looked pensive for a moment, then her eyes widened. "Actually, yes. She mentioned something about wanting to find the old ruins near the trail. I thought she was joking at first. They're supposed to be haunted." Jonathan's heart raced. The old ruins. He had heard whispers of the place. A dilapidated structure, hidden deep within the woods, rumored to be the site of unexplained disappearances over the years. Where are they located? Emily quickly drew a rough sketch on a napkin, her hand shaking slightly as she marked the path to the ruins. "You need to be careful, John. People say it's cursed. No one who goes there ever comes back the same." A chill ran down Jonathan's spine as he studied the map. The ruins were not far from the clearing where he had found Lily's locket. The pieces were beginning to align, but with each connection came a deeper sense of dread. I have to go there, Jonathan said resolutely, his mind made up. Are you sure that's a good idea? Emily pleaded, concern etched on her face. What if you find something you're not ready for? I have to know, he replied, determination flaring in his chest. For Lily. As Jonathan left the cafe, clutching the sketch in his hand, he felt the weight of his family's expectations and fears pressing down on him. He was venturing into the unknown, but it was a journey he had to take. The woods held secrets that could shatter his world, or perhaps bring him one step closer to finding Lily. The woods loomed ahead as Jonathan approached the trailhead, shadows stretching across the path like fingers reaching out to pull him in. The air was thick with anticipation, a sense of foreboding that clung to him like the dampness in the air. Clutching the sketch Emily had drawn, he steeled himself, knowing he was about to confront the unknown. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the sounds of the world outside faded into silence. The chirping of birds and rustle of leaves gave way to an unsettling stillness, amplifying the sound of his footsteps crunching on the fallen leaves. Every snap of a twig felt like an alarm, echoing in the quiet surroundings. Following Emily's rough directions, he navigated through thick underbrush and towering trees, the path becoming increasingly overgrown and treacherous. It felt as though the forest was conspiring against him, each twist and turn leading him further into its depths. The sun filtered through the canopy, casting eerie shadows that danced around him, creating the illusion of movement just beyond his line of sight. After what felt like hours, Jonathan stumbled upon a clearing. His heart raced as he spotted the ruins ahead, crumbling stones overrun with moss, vines entwined like serpents. The structure appeared ancient, its walls standing as a testament to a long-forgotten time. This was it, the place where Lily had wanted to go. As he stepped closer, he noticed the air felt heavier, almost charged with energy, like a storm was brewing just out of reach. He paused, his instincts screaming at him to turn back, but the thought of Lily propelled him forward. With each step, the whispers of the forest grew louder, filling his mind with a cacophony of doubt and dread. The entrance to the ruins was partially collapsed, stones strewn about, as if a great force had attempted to consume the building from the inside. Gathering his courage, Jonathan ducked under the low archway, the air inside stale and cool. It smelled of damp earth and decay, a stark contrast to the vibrant life outside. Inside, the ruins were darker than he had expected. Light barely penetrated through the gaps in the walls, creating pockets of shadows that seemed to pulse with life. As he moved cautiously through the debris, his heart raced, echoing in the silence. What was he searching for? Clues about Lily? Or perhaps something more sinister lurking within these walls? His footsteps echoed through the empty halls, each sound magnified in the stillness. It was unsettling, the way the silence wrapped around him, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Just as he began to feel overwhelmed by the darkness, something caught his eye. Scratches on the stone walls, deep and jagged, as if something had clawed its way through. Jonathan knelt to inspect them, tracing the lines with his fingers. They were fresh, the edges not yet worn smooth by time. Panic surged within him. Was he truly alone? The thought of another presence made his skin crawl, but he pushed it aside, determined to find answers. Continuing deeper into the ruins, he found a small chamber. The air was thick with dust, and as he stepped inside, he felt an odd chill seep into his bones. In the center of the room stood a broken altar, its surface adorned with remnants of old candles, now melted and misshapen. It was clear that this place had been used for something, rituals, perhaps, or offerings to whatever dwelled in the shadows. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the oppressive silence, a low murmur, almost like a voice. Jonathan's heart raced as he strained to listen. "Help me." The voice was soft, barely a whisper, but it sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through him. "Lily," he called out, his voice echoing off the walls. "Is that you?" The whisper stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness. Doubt crept in, twisting in his gut. Was he truly hearing her voice? Or was it just his mind playing tricks on him? "Help me." The voice returned, this time a little clearer, a plea for assistance that made his heart ache. He followed the sound, moving deeper into the darkness, driven by desperation. As he rounded a corner, the temperature dropped sharply, and he found himself in a narrow corridor. The walls felt slick with moisture, and he could see a faint light flickering at the end. The voice was stronger now, echoing through the corridor like a beacon. "Please help me." Jonathan rushed towards the light, each step pounding in his ears. He reached the end and pushed through a doorway, stumbling into a small, dimly lit room. The light flickered from a single candle resting on a stone table, casting shadows that danced like phantoms around him. In the corner of the room, he froze. There, in the flickering light, was a figure, a girl with long, tangled hair and hollow eyes, her body slumped against the wall. It was Lily. "Lily!" Jonathan gasped, rushing to her side. "What happened?" "I've been looking for you." But as he reached for her, she faded into the shadows, her expression shifting from relief to terror. "You shouldn't have come here, Jonathan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You have to leave before it's too late." His heart raced as he searched for her again, but the room was empty. The candle flickered violently, and he felt an oppressive weight bearing down on him, a presence that made his skin crawl. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows thickening like a shroud around him. "Leave," the voice echoed, now filled with an otherworldly intensity. Jonathan stumbled backward, panic surging through him as he turned to flee. The way back seemed to twist and turn, the shadows shifting, trying to ensnare him. He sprinted through the ruins, the air growing heavier with each step. The whispering shadows pursued him, wrapping around his legs, dragging him back toward the darkness. He could hear the voice calling out again, this time not Lily's but a chorus of anguished cries. "Help us! Let us go!" With a surge of adrenaline, Jonathan pushed himself harder, determined to escape. He burst through the entrance, stumbling into the light of the day. The sun felt warm against his skin, a stark contrast to the chilling presence that still clung to him. Panting, he turned back to look at the ruins, dread washing over him. Something was not right, and he could feel it deep in his bones. The forest whispered around him, secrets rustling through the leaves, and he knew he had only scratched the surface of what lay hidden within. Jonathan stumbled away from the ruins, his heart racing and thoughts swirling like leaves caught in a storm. The sunlight that had felt so comforting moments ago now seemed harsh and unwelcoming. He needed to regroup, to make sense of what he had just experienced. The forest, once a place of adventure, now felt like a labyrinth of dread and uncertainty. Back at his car, Jonathan fumbled with his keys, hands trembling as he tried to steady himself. He finally managed to unlock the door, collapsing into the driver's seat, gasping for breath. He could still hear the whispers of those lost souls echoing in his mind, their pleas mingling with Lily's fading image. It felt as if they were clawing at his consciousness, begging him to return. "What happened in there?" he muttered to himself, trying to shake off the suffocating weight of fear that settled over him. He could feel the remnants of that chilling darkness clinging to his skin, an unshakable sense that he hadn't left it all behind. He pulled out his phone and stared at it, the screen reflecting his shaken visage. He had to find answers. After a moment's hesitation, he opened a search engine and began typing, "The history of the ruins in Hawthorne Woods." The search results populated, each headline more ominous than the last. Stories of disappearances, ghost sightings, and old legends surrounded the place he had just visited. His heart sank further with each article he clicked. It was clear that this forest held secrets darker than he had ever imagined. One article caught his eye, "The Legend of the Wailing Woods, a history of lost souls." With trembling hands, he clicked on it, absorbing the words that danced across the screen. The article spoke of a village that once thrived in the area, a village that had been consumed by greed and betrayal, leading to a dark pact with an unseen force in the woods. The villagers, in their desperation, had offered their loved ones as sacrifices to ensure prosperity, but the deal had twisted into a nightmare, leaving behind tormented souls trapped within the trees. Jonathan felt a chill creep down his spine as he read about a girl named Lily, the last known victim of the wood's malevolence. The more he read, the more the pieces began to fit together. Was the Lily he knew connected to this girl? Was it possible that she was more than just a friend lost to the dark? Had she somehow become a part of this cursed legacy? He couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching him, the trees looming like ancient sentinels, holding on to secrets that had festered for generations. His mind raced with questions. Had she known about the legends? Had she drawn him into this web of darkness without intending to? Fueled by a mix of determination and dread, Jonathan made a decision. He had to return to the ruins and confront whatever darkness lay within, not just for Lily, but for the countless souls that had been trapped there. If he could find a way to free them, maybe he could save her too. That evening, he gathered supplies, flashlights, a first aid kit, and a camera to document everything. He felt a strange mixture of fear and purpose as he loaded his backpack. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across his apartment, the fading light mirroring the uncertainty in his heart. As night fell, Jonathan made his way back to the forest, the path illuminated only by the beam of his flashlight. Each step felt heavy, the darkness thickening around him like a living entity. The familiar sounds of the forest, owls hooting, leaves rustling, now felt ominous, as if they were warning him against his reckless pursuit. When he reached the clearing again, the ruins stood before him, bathed in moonlight. They seemed to breathe, exhaling the memories of all who had wandered there before. The air felt charged, electric, as if the very atmosphere was alive with anticipation. With a deep breath, he stepped inside. The interior was just as he had left it, the shadows deepening, swallowing the light from his flashlight. Jonathan scanned the room, searching for any signs of the strange energy he had felt earlier. The broken altar loomed in the center, and as he approached, the whispers returned, swirling around him like a tempest. "Help us," they called, the voices echoing off the walls, mingling together in a chorus of despair. Jonathan closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. He focused on Lily's face, the memory of her laughter guiding him forward. "Show me how to help you," he shouted, his voice cutting through the oppressive darkness. "If you're here, I need you to guide me." For a moment, silence enveloped him, and just as doubt began to creep in, the candle flickered violently. Jonathan's heart raced as the flame flared to life, illuminating a path deeper into the ruins. He followed the light, each step echoing with newfound determination. As he moved forward, the air around him grew colder, wrapping around him like a chilling embrace. The flickering candlelight danced along the walls, revealing more scratches, more signs of struggle. Suddenly, he stumbled upon a small door, half hidden behind a pile of rubble. It was ajar, revealing darkness beyond. With a deep breath, Jonathan pushed the door open. Inside was a narrow staircase descending into the abyss. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the stone walls. "Help us." The voices were clearer now, urging him forward. Without hesitation, he stepped into the darkness, the air growing heavier with each step down. The stairs seemed endless, twisting into the earth as he descended deeper into the unknown. Finally, he reached the bottom, stepping into a dimly lit chamber. The room was small, its walls covered in symbols Jonathan didn't recognize. In the center lay an old stone table, etched with names, dates, and markings that sent chills down his spine. He approached it cautiously, feeling the weight of the past pressing in on him. As he leaned closer, the air shimmered, and a vision overtook him, images flashing before his eyes. A group of villagers gathered around the altar, faces twisted in despair. A girl, her eyes filled with fear, being led to the table, and then darkness, swallowing everything whole. Gasping, Jonathan pulled back, the vision leaving him shaken. He understood now. The altar was a conduit, a place where the past still lingered, where the souls of the sacrificed remained trapped. The only way to free them was to confront the darkness that bound them. The candle flickered wildly as he steeled himself, remembering Lily's voice. "Help me." He closed his eyes and concentrated, calling out to the spirits bound in this place. "I'm here to help. Show me what I need to do." A gust of wind blew through the chamber, extinguishing the candle, plunging him into darkness. The whispers escalated to a crescendo, drowning out his thoughts. Panic surged within him, but he fought to remain calm, trusting in the connection he felt with Lily and the lost souls. "Show me," he shouted again, voice trembling but resolute. In response, a sudden light flared to life in the corner of the chamber, illuminating a small altar adorned with fresh flowers and offerings. It looked as if someone had been trying to communicate with the spirits, trying to appease the darkness. Jonathan stepped closer, feeling a pulse of energy radiating from the altar. He reached out to touch it, and the moment his fingers brushed against the stone, a vision overtook him again. This time, it was Lily, her face illuminated by the same light, pleading with him. "Jonathan, please. You have to finish what was started. You can break the curse." His heart raced at the urgency in her eyes. He realized what he had to do. He had to confront the darkness, to finish the ritual that had begun long ago. With newfound determination, he gathered the items from the altar: a few wilted flowers, an old photograph, and what appeared to be a small journal. Flipping through its pages, he found accounts of the villagers' attempts to break the curse, their pleas for forgiveness, and the despair that had taken hold of their lives. The final entry sent chills down his spine. To break the curse, one must sacrifice their own fear and confront the darkness that binds the lost souls. Only then can the cycle be broken and the spirits set free. His pulse quickened as he realized the weight of his decision. This was it. He had to face the darkness, not just for Lily, but for all the souls trapped within these woods. Gathering his courage, Jonathan placed the items back on the altar and began to chant the words he had found in the journal, the ancient language flowing from his lips as if he had known it all along. With each word, he felt the energy in the room shift, the shadows writhing and responding to his call. "By the light of the past, by the love unbound, I free these souls from darkness profound." The air crackled around him, the whispers rising to a deafening roar. He pushed forward, channeling every ounce of his determination into the chant. "Let them go. Let them be free." Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath him, the chamber shaking as if the very foundation of the ruins was coming undone. Light burst from the altar, enveloping him in a warm glow. Jonathan felt the weight of the shadows begin to lift, a sense of release washing over him as the cries of the lost souls transformed into joyous laughter. The room filled with light, the whispers turning to cheers as the spirits began to ascend, breaking free from the chains that had bound them for so long. As the last of the shadows dissipated, Jonathan stood amidst a whirlwind of glowing figures, their ethereal forms shimmering with gratitude and relief. The warmth enveloped him, and he felt a profound sense of connection to each soul, as if their stories and struggles were now a part of him. He was no longer an outsider, but a part of the tapestry woven from their pain and hope. The air around him was filled with laughter and whispers of thanks, echoes of lives once lost now rejoicing in their newfound freedom. He closed his eyes, letting the light wash over him, filling the void that had settled in his heart since Lily's disappearance. The last remnants of fear melted away, replaced by a profound peace. "Thank you," Jonathan called out, his voice reverberating through the chamber, carried by the light. "Thank you for trusting me." Suddenly, he felt a familiar presence beside him, and when he opened his eyes, he saw Lily standing there, her form radiant and ethereal, a smile illuminating her face. Tears of joy filled his eyes as he stepped forward. "Lily," he exclaimed, reaching out. "Is it really you?" She nodded, her expression serene. "You did it, Jonathan. You freed them. You freed me." Jonathan's heart swelled at her words, but confusion washed over him. "But how? I don't understand. I thought I lost you." "You never lost me," she said softly, her voice echoing like a gentle breeze. "I was trapped just like the others, but your courage brought me back. You faced the darkness that had held us for so long." As they spoke, the light surrounding them began to flicker, the joyous spirits swirling around, drawing closer. Jonathan felt a sense of urgency build within him. The chamber trembled again, but this time, it was not fear, it was the power of liberation. "I didn't know what I was doing," he admitted, shaking his head. "I just followed my heart, "That's what saved us," Lily replied, her eyes shining with warmth. "You listened to the call of our souls, and that made all the difference." Just then, a powerful gust of wind swept through the chamber, and the light intensified, filling every crevice and corner. The walls shimmered with energy, and the spirits began to ascend, swirling upward toward the ceiling, their forms becoming one with the light. Jonathan's heart raced as he watched, mesmerized by the beautiful sight. "What's happening?" "They are free now," Lily explained, her voice softening. "We all are. But I need to go back. You must let me go." Panic surged within him at the thought of losing her again. "No, I can't. I need you." "Jonathan," she said, her voice calm and soothing, "this is how it has to be. My time in this world has ended, but my spirit will always be with you. You have to live your life. Remember me, but don't let my memory hold you back." Tears streamed down Jonathan's face as he struggled to let her go. "But how can I? I love you." Lily smiled, her expression filled with love. "And I love you. That love will never fade. It will guide you, even in the darkest moments. Trust it. Trust yourself." As she spoke, the light enveloped her, her form beginning to dissolve into the radiant glow of the freed souls. Jonathan reached out, but she was already becoming part of the light, her essence mingling with the other spirits. "Live, Jonathan," her voice echoed, resonating in his heart. "Live for both of us." With a final burst of energy, the spirits surged upward, breaking through the ceiling as a brilliant flash of light illuminated the chamber, filling the ruins with warmth and life. Jonathan shielded his eyes, feeling the overwhelming sense of joy and relief wash over him. Then, just as quickly as it began, the light faded, leaving behind a stillness that felt almost sacred. Jonathan stood alone in the chamber, the echoes of the laughter and whispers lingering in the air. The oppressive weight that had settled over the ruins for so long was lifted, leaving behind an aura of peace. Taking a deep breath, Jonathan stepped back from the altar, feeling lighter than he had in days. The darkness that had threatened to consume him was gone, and with it, the burden of guilt and despair. He knew now that he had to leave this place, to take the lessons he had learned and carry them into the world. He had to honor the memory of the souls he had freed and the love he shared with Lily. With one last glance at the now empty chamber, he turned and made his way back up the stairs. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, the stars shone brighter than he had ever seen them, each twinkle a reminder of the spirits that had found their way home. He smiled, feeling a sense of purpose awaken within him. Jonathan walked through the forest, the path illuminated by the moonlight. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind felt like a gentle caress, guiding him forward. He was ready to embrace life, to find his way in the world, and to remember Lily with love, not sadness. As he made his way home, he could still hear the faint echoes of the lost souls, their cries now transformed into a beautiful symphony of freedom. Jonathan knew that no matter where life took him, he would carry them, and Lily, within him, guiding him through the shadows and into the light. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The rain fell heavily on the small town of Eldridge, each drop tapping against the windows of the old Victorian house that stood at the end of a narrow street. Inside, the air was thick with a sense of unease, as if the very walls of the house were whispering secrets of the past. This was home to Oliver Grant, a solitary man in his late 30s who had always felt a bit out of place in the world around him. From a young age, Oliver had been aware of a presence that followed him. At first, it was a shadow that flitted at the edges of his vision, something he could never quite turn around to see. It wasn't until he turned 10 that he began to sense its weight beside him, an invisible companion that hovered just out of sight, always lurking in the corners of his life. As he grew older, this shadow took on a more tangible form, a dark silhouette that seemed to mirror his movements, always close but never truly revealing itself. On this particular night, Oliver sat at his desk, cluttered with the remnants of his work. A stack of papers filled with half-finished stories, notebooks filled with ideas that never seemed to come to fruition. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his tousled hair, frustration creeping in. He was a writer, or at least he aspired to be, but the words never flowed as easily as they did for others. The shadow, a constant reminder of his struggles, loomed behind him, its presence heavy and oppressive. "Why can't I just be normal?" he muttered to himself, glancing at the empty chair beside him. "Why can't I just write like everyone else?" The shadow seemed to shift, and Oliver felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if it were responding to his words, taunting him with its silent judgment. He shook his head, trying to dispel the sense of paranoia that always came with acknowledging the shadow's existence. After all, it was just a figment of his imagination, a byproduct of his overactive mind. He stood up, pacing the room in an attempt to shake off the feeling. The rain continued to pour outside, a relentless rhythm that mirrored the chaos in his mind. As he moved toward the window, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass, his own weary eyes staring back at him. But there was something else, something darker lurking just behind him. He turned abruptly, but the room was empty. "Get a grip, Oliver," he said aloud, forcing a laugh to break the tension. "You're just tired." He turned back to the window, watching as the rain painted the world outside in shades of gray. The street lamps flickered in the storm, casting an eerie glow that made the shadows dance along the walls of his room. The flickering light seemed to pulse in rhythm with the growing unease in his gut. That night, sleep eluded him. No matter how hard he tried to close his eyes, the shadow was always there, pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't shake. It was a constant reminder of his failures, of the dreams that remained just out of reach. As the hours ticked by, he could hear the faint whispers of the past echoing in his mind, a cacophony of voices reminding him of the opportunities he had missed, the friendships he had let slip away. Finally, surrendering to his racing thoughts, he rose from his bed and made his way downstairs. He reached for a cup of tea, hoping the warmth would chase away the chill that had settled in his bones. As he poured the water, he glanced toward the hallway mirror. In that split second, he saw it, the shadow lurking behind him, its form darker than the night itself, stretching along the wall as if it were part of the house. His heart raced as he turned to confront it, but again, there was nothing there. The hallway was empty, and the only sound was the gentle patter of rain against the roof. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. It was just his imagination, he told himself again and again. Just a trick of the light. But deep down, he knew the truth. The shadow was more than just a figment of his imagination. It was a part of him, a manifestation of his fears and regrets. And it was not going to leave him alone. With a trembling hand, he reached for his notebook, the pages filled with the remnants of his thoughts. The words spilled out onto the page, an unfiltered stream of consciousness, fueled by the darkness that clung to him. He wrote about the shadow, about the feeling of being followed, the whispers that echoed in his mind. The more he wrote, the more liberated he felt, as if each word he penned was a step toward confronting the shadow's hold on his life. As dawn broke, the first rays of light spilled into the room, casting a golden glow that banished the darkness of the night. Oliver looked at the notebook, pages filled with his anguish, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps by confronting his fears, he could begin to understand the shadow that never left his side. The journey to uncover the truth behind the shadow was just beginning. Oliver knew that to move forward, he would have to delve deeper into the darkness, confront the pain and regrets that had haunted him for so long. The shadow was not merely an adversary, but a key to unlocking the answers he sought. As he closed his notebook, a strange calm washed over him. He glanced once more toward the hallway mirror, half expecting to see the shadow lurking behind him. Instead, he found only his reflection, tired, worn, but alive. A new determination sparked within him. He would not let the shadow dictate his life any longer. The following weeks unfolded with a strange sense of clarity for Oliver. Each day, he rose with a renewed sense of purpose, the shadow still present, but no longer a suffocating weight. Instead, it had transformed into a guide, leading him into the depths of his own mind. He found solace in his writing, a way to untangle the complexities of his thoughts and emotions. Each page was a step forward, an exploration of the fears that had once paralyzed him. As the rain continued to drench Eldridge, Oliver decided it was time to confront the source of his shadow. He needed to delve into his past, to unearth the memories that had long been buried in the recesses of his mind. There were family stories he had avoided, dark secrets whispered among relatives, and old photographs that hinted at a lineage shrouded in mystery. One chilly afternoon, as the wind howled outside, Oliver ventured into the attic of his home. The attic was a realm of dust and memories, cluttered with boxes and forgotten treasures. He had always been hesitant to explore it, but today felt different. Armed with a flashlight, he climbed the creaking stairs, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. The attic smelled of mildew and old wood, a musty scent that clung to his clothes as he made his way through the maze of boxes. He shone his light around, illuminating stacks of forgotten relics, a cracked mirror, a broken clock, and a moth-eaten trunk that seemed to call to him. Curiosity piqued. Oliver knelt beside the trunk, fingers brushing over the intricate carvings etched into the wood. He opened the trunk with a creak, revealing its contents: old clothes, yellowed letters, and photographs that whispered tales of a bygone era. One photo caught his eye, a family portrait taken decades ago, the faces smiling, but there was something unsettling about it. A shadow loomed just behind them, dark and indistinct, almost as if it were part of the photograph. Oliver felt a chill race down his spine. Could this shadow be a harbinger of the presence that haunted him? As he examined the photo closer, he noticed a name written in elegant script on the back: the Dunmore family, 1932. His heart raced as he recognized the name. He had heard tales of the Dunmore family from his grandmother, a family who had lived in the very house he now called home. Rumors circulated about their mysterious disappearance, a dark chapter in the town's history that was often whispered about, but rarely discussed openly. Determined to uncover the truth, Oliver began sifting through the letters in the trunk. They were love letters exchanged between a young woman named Clara Dunmore and her suitor, Edward. The words painted a picture of a passionate romance, filled with hopes and dreams, but there was a haunting undercurrent to them. Clara wrote of feeling watched, of hearing footsteps in the halls when no one else was there. The letters gradually took on a darker tone, her handwriting growing frantic as she expressed her fears of a shadow that lingered in their home. The deeper Oliver delved, the more disturbed he became. Clara's final letter was a desperate plea for help, detailing a night when she felt the presence close, whispering her name and taunting her with the secrets it knew. She wrote of wanting to escape, to leave the house that had become a prison, but the letter ended abruptly, as if it had been torn from her hand in the midst of a struggle. Oliver felt his heart race as he pieced together the fragments of Clara's life. The parallels between her experience and his own were uncanny. It was as if the shadow that haunted him had once haunted her, an unending cycle of fear that transcended time. The words from her letters resonated with him, echoing in the silence of the attic as if they were calling out for resolution. "Why did you stay?" he whispered to the photo, his voice barely above a murmur. "What happened to you?" Determined to find answers, Oliver knew he had to learn more about the Dunmore family and their tragic fate. He spent the following days scouring local archives, poring over dusty newspapers and town records. With each discovery, he uncovered a web of secrets and half-truths, a history filled with tragedy, loss, and a chilling connection to the shadow that had plagued him for so long. The townsfolk were tight-lipped about the Dunmores, speaking in hushed tones of a family cursed, of whispers in the night that drove them to madness. They avoided the house, warning Oliver of its haunted reputation. But he felt a pull toward the darkness, a need to confront the shadow head-on, to understand the force that intertwined their lives. As he continued his research, the nights grew longer, and the rain outside became a constant companion, echoing the turmoil within him. The shadow, once a source of fear, became a catalyst for his exploration. Each evening, he returned to the attic, filling pages with his thoughts and revelations, unraveling the threads that connected him to Clara Dunmore. But as the pieces began to fall into place, Oliver felt an unsettling change in the atmosphere around him. The shadows in his home grew thicker, more tangible, as if they were alive and shifting in response to his discoveries. Whispers echoed in the silence, and he could almost hear Clara's voice pleading for him to uncover the truth, to not let her story fade into obscurity. One fateful night, while reviewing his notes, Oliver heard a faint sound behind him, a soft shuffle, like footsteps on the wooden floorboards. He froze, heart pounding in his chest, as the shadow flickered at the edge of his vision. The room grew colder, and the familiar weight of the presence settled heavily beside him. "Clara," he called out, his voice trembling with both fear and determination. "Is that you?" For a moment, silence enveloped him. The shadows pulsed around the room, thickening and swirling as if they were responding to his call. Then, with a rush of air, a voice emerged from the darkness, barely a whisper, yet clear as day. "Help me!" Oliver felt a jolt of electricity surge through him. This was not just his imagination. This was Clara, reaching out from beyond the veil, begging for him to uncover the truth of her fate. The weight of the shadows pressed down upon him, urging him to act, to dig deeper into the mysteries that bound their lives together. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, but Oliver understood now that he was not alone in this journey. The shadow at his side was a reminder of the struggles they both faced, a shared pain that connected them across time. He would not rest until he unveiled the secrets that had remained hidden for too long. With renewed determination, he set out to find the truth about Clara Dunmore, ready to face whatever darkness awaited him. The next day dawned gray and dreary, mirroring the storm brewing within Oliver. He awoke with a sense of urgency coursing through his veins, the voice of Clara Dunmore echoing in his mind. The weight of her untold story pressed down on him, compelling him to take action. The attic felt more like a sanctuary than a repository of memories. It was a bridge to the past that he needed to traverse. After a quick breakfast, he armed himself with a notepad, a flashlight, and a determination to uncover every shred of information he could find about the Dunmore family. He knew he needed to visit the town library, a place filled with archives, old newspapers, and perhaps even hidden histories that would illuminate Clara's life, and possibly her death. The Eldridge Town Library was an imposing brick structure, its towering shelves filled with dust and whispers of the past. As Oliver walked through the heavy oak doors, the musty smell of old paper and leather-bound volumes enveloped him. He approached the front desk, where a woman with graying hair and spectacles perched on the tip of her nose looked up from a pile of books. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice warm yet cautious. "I'm looking for information on the Dunmore family. I believe they lived here a long time ago," Oliver said, trying to suppress the anxiety bubbling within him. The librarian's eyes flickered with recognition. "Ah, the Dunmores. A tragic story indeed. They lived in the old house on Maple Street. Most people around here don't talk about them anymore." Oliver nodded, urging her to continue. "Could you point me to any records or articles about them?" She led him to a small room at the back of the library, filled with archives and local history. "You might find what you're looking for in the old newspapers. Just be careful. Some of the articles are quite old and fragile." "Thank you," Oliver replied, feeling a rush of gratitude as he stepped into the dimly lit room. He spent hours poring over yellowed pages, the faint scent of ink and dust filling the air. As he searched, he stumbled upon headlines that sent shivers down his spine. Mysterious disappearance of the Dunmore family, Eldridge's forgotten tragedy, and the haunted house on Maple Street. Each article painted a chilling picture of a family tormented by unseen forces. In one article, he discovered a mention of Clara's father, William Dunmore, described as a once-respected member of the community who became increasingly reclusive in the years leading up to the family's disappearance. Neighbors reported strange noises coming from the house at night, sounds that resembled cries or whispers, echoing through the darkened streets. Oliver's heart raced as he flipped through more articles, each one revealing a thread of the Dunmore story. One particularly disturbing piece detailed how William had become obsessed with the occult, claiming he was in contact with spirits from beyond. The final article spoke of a local priest who attempted to perform an exorcism in the house, only to be met with bizarre occurrences that left him shaken and terrified. As he read, Oliver felt a sense of dread wash over him. The parallels between Clara's letters and the news articles were uncanny. The shadow that haunted him now felt like a manifestation of the Dunmore's torment, a lingering presence that had refused to let go of its grip on the house and on him. Just as he was about to leave the archive, something caught his eye, a small, worn leather-bound journal tucked between two dusty tomes. It had no title, but as he opened it, he felt an inexplicable pull. The handwriting was familiar, delicate and flowing. It was Clara's journal. Heart pounding, he flipped through the pages, reading her thoughts penned in the throes of despair. She wrote of her father's descent into madness, the voices that haunted their home, and her growing sense of isolation. There were entries detailing the shadowy figure that seemed to loom over her, a presence that whispered her name in the dead of night, tormenting her with secrets she did not understand. The final entry sent chills down Oliver's spine. Clara described a night when the shadow had become overwhelming, consuming her with fear. "It knows my fears," she wrote. "It knows what I've hidden. I cannot escape it. I feel it drawing nearer, suffocating me. I need to leave this house, but I fear will follow." As Oliver read those words, the weight of Clara's anguish crashed over him. The shadow he felt at his side was not just a figment of his imagination. It was a connection to Clara's torment. He realized that he needed to confront this darkness, to discover what it wanted, and to free both himself and Clara from its grasp. With newfound determination, he returned home, clutching Clara's journal tightly. The night was closing in, the rain tapping rhythmically against the windows, and the air felt charged with anticipation. The shadows in his home flickered ominously, swirling around him as he opened the journal again. "Clara, I'll find you," he whispered into the darkness, feeling the shadows draw closer, almost as if they were listening. He spent the rest of the evening piecing together the clues from Clara's writings and the newspaper articles. He knew he had to return to the Dunmore house on Maple Street, where the past was etched into the very walls. He would confront the shadows and unravel the truth that had haunted Clara for decades. The following day, a storm loomed on the horizon, casting a gray pall over Eldridge. Oliver felt an uncanny sense of foreboding as he prepared for his journey to the Dunmore house. He could hardly shake off the feeling that Clara's spirit was guiding him, urging him to uncover the truth hidden within those walls. Armed with her journal and a flashlight, he set out to confront the shadows that had haunted him since he first stepped into the attic. The Dunmore house stood at the end of Maple Street, its once grand facade now obscured by years of neglect. Weeds crawled up the stone steps, and shattered windows seemed to stare down at him like hollow eyes. Oliver hesitated at the threshold, his heart pounding in his chest. The house felt alive, pulsating with a dark energy that seemed to beckon him forward. As he pushed the creaking door open, a gust of wind rushed past him, as if exhaling the memories trapped inside. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay, but beneath it lay a whisper of something more: fear, sorrow, and a lingering sadness that wrapped around him like a shroud. "Clara," he whispered, stepping inside. The foyer was dimly lit, the wallpaper peeling and faded. Shadows danced along the walls, shifting as though they had a life of their own. He took a deep breath, steeling himself against the growing sense of unease. Following the journal's entries, he made his way toward the living room, where Clara had described the worst of the haunting. As he entered the room, he felt an immediate chill wash over him. The air turned colder, and the shadows deepened, twisting into shapes that almost seemed to beckon him closer. He flicked on his flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness, illuminating old furniture draped in white sheets, remnants of a life once lived. In the center of the room, he spotted an old armchair that Clara had often mentioned in her journal. It faced the fireplace, which was long cold, but still held a palpable sense of warmth in the memories it contained. He approached the chair, running his fingers over the dusty fabric, feeling an echo of Clara's presence envelop him. "Why did you stay here, Clara?" he murmured to the empty room. "What kept you trapped in this darkness?" Just as he spoke, he felt a presence behind him, a sudden rush of cold air that sent a shiver down his spine. Turning quickly, he aimed the flashlight toward the source of the chill, revealing a dark corner of the room. Shadows danced there, swirling in an unnatural rhythm. And in that moment, Oliver understood. This was the shadow that had haunted Clara, the very essence of her fears made manifest. "Show yourself," he demanded, his voice stronger than he felt. The shadows coalesced, forming a shape that was indistinct yet undeniably human. A cold wind swept through the room, and with it came a voice, deep and resonant, echoing through the chamber. "You shouldn't have come here," it warned, a blend of anger and sorrow intertwining in its tone. Oliver's heart raced, but he stood his ground. "I'm here for Clara. She deserves peace. What do you want?" The shadow shivered, as if caught in a tempest, and then it spoke again, its voice a whispering wind. "She was mine. I tried to protect her from the darkness, but the darkness consumed us both. Clara wrote about you." Oliver pressed, flipping through the pages of her journal. "You tormented her, fed on her fears." "Why?" The shadow loomed larger, its features becoming more distinct. Eyes that glowed like embers, a mouth twisted into a frown. "I was her protector and her curse. I was born from her pain. When she sought to escape, I could not let her go." Oliver felt a pang of sadness mixed with fear. "You think holding her here is protecting her? It's suffocating her." A silence fell over the room, the air thick with tension. "You don't understand. If she leaves, the darkness will find her. I cannot let that happen." "I'm not afraid of the darkness," Oliver replied, his voice steady. "You can't keep her trapped in a place filled with sorrow. Let her go." With each word, he felt the weight of Clara's anguish, the chains that had bound her to this house for so long. The shadow flickered, wavering as if torn between two worlds. "You're different," it murmured. "You carry her light, but the darkness, it will always be there." "I'll fight it," Oliver vowed, determination surging within him. "But Clara deserves to be free. You can choose to let her go." The shadow hesitated, the air growing still, the weight of Oliver's words sinking in. In that moment, the shadows shifted, revealing a glimpse of Clara, her ethereal form emerging from the darkness. "Oliver," she whispered, her voice like a soft breeze. "Help me. I'm so tired." Seeing her in this form brought a rush of emotion to Oliver's chest. "Clara, I'm here. You're not alone anymore." The shadow recoiled at her appearance, its form growing frantic. "No, she belongs to me. Let her go," Oliver shouted, feeling a surge of power as he reached out toward Clara. "You can be free too. You don't have to be bound to this darkness." In a moment of clarity, the shadow paused, its features shifting as though grappling with its existence. Clara stepped forward, her eyes filled with hope. "Please," she urged, "I need to be free." With a final pulse of energy, the shadow released a mournful wail, a sound that reverberated through the room like a haunting melody. It began to dissolve, its dark form unraveling into wisps of smoke, leaving behind an echo of sorrow that faded into silence. As the last remnants of the shadow dissipated, Clara's form solidified, her presence illuminating the room. The air grew warm, the oppressive weight lifting, and the heaviness that had long haunted the house began to dissipate. "Oliver," Clara breathed, tears glistening in her eyes. "You did it. You freed me." As the reality of their situation set in, Oliver stepped closer, his heart swelling with relief. "I won't let you go again. You're safe now." But Clara's expression shifted, a hint of sadness shadowing her features. "I can finally move on, but the darkness will always exist. You must remember to fight it, Oliver. It seeks to consume everyone, but you have the strength to resist." "I will," he promised, feeling the weight of her words. "I'll carry your light with me." As Clara began to fade, her form shimmering in the dim light, Oliver felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. "Thank you," he whispered, watching as she transformed into a gentle glow before disappearing entirely. The room felt lighter, the shadows no longer menacing, but rather soft and forgiving. He stood alone in the Dunmore house, but he felt Clara's presence, a warmth wrapping around him like a protective embrace. The haunting had ended, and the house was finally at rest. The following day, Oliver returned to the Dunmore house, this time with a sense of purpose. With Clara's spirit finally at peace, he felt compelled to restore the house to its former glory. It was a way to honor her memory and ensure that the darkness that had lingered for so long would never return. As he stepped through the threshold, the light flooded in through the broken windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The oppressive atmosphere that had once enveloped the home was gone, replaced by a tranquil serenity. It was as if the house itself was breathing a sigh of relief. He began cleaning, sweeping away years of neglect and decay. Each piece of furniture he uncovered told a story, a testament to the life Clara had once lived. He found a small, ornate mirror in the corner of the living room, its surface tarnished but still beautiful. As he polished it, he imagined Clara looking into it, her smile brightening the room. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Oliver transformed the Dunmore house into a sanctuary. He painted the walls, mended the broken fixtures, and filled the rooms with light. The shadow of despair that had lingered there was replaced with laughter and warmth. Neighbors began to notice the change, and often stopped by to offer their help. One evening, while sorting through Clara's belongings, he came across a photo album tucked away in a dusty corner of the attic. The cover was worn, but inside lay memories of Clara's life. Pictures of her as a child, growing up, and moments spent with her family. As he turned the pages, he felt a mix of joy and sorrow. These were the moments that had been stolen from her, but now they were alive again in his heart. That night, as he lay in bed, he heard a soft rustling outside his window. Peeking through the curtains, he was greeted by a breathtaking sight. The moon hung high in the sky, bathing the yard in silver light, and amidst the trees stood a figure. It was Clara, her form shimmering like a soft glow, smiling at him. "Thank you for everything, Oliver," she whispered, her voice carried by the wind. He felt a warmth wash over him, a sense of fulfillment. "You're free now, Clara. I'll always remember you." Her smile widened, and as the moonlight enveloped her, she began to fade away. "Keep shining your light. You have the strength to overcome anything." And then she was gone, leaving behind a profound silence that was comforting rather than lonely. Oliver realized that he had not just restored the Dunmore house. He had reclaimed a piece of Clara's life and legacy. The darkness had been vanquished, and in its place blossomed a renewed sense of hope. As dawn broke over Eldridge, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Oliver stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air. He could hear the birds singing, their melodies a sweet reminder that life continued. With renewed purpose, he dedicated himself to the community, sharing Clara's story and helping others who faced their own battles with darkness. The Dunmore house became a beacon of light, a place where people gathered not just to remember the past, but to create new memories, laughter echoing through its halls, friendships blossoming in its rooms. Oliver had turned a forgotten place of sorrow into a home filled with love and connection. And as he walked through the yard, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. Clara's spirit would always be with him, guiding him, reminding him of the strength found in facing one's fears. The shadow that had once plagued them both was now a distant memory, a testament to the power of love, courage, and the enduring light of the human spirit. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The night was quiet, a peaceful calm that blanketed the small town of Maplewood. Streetlights flickered gently, casting soft pools of light on the asphalt, while the crickets serenaded the evening. Inside her cozy apartment, Emma Hastings settled into her favorite armchair, the soft glow of the lamp creating a warm ambience. She wrapped herself in a blanket, a steaming mug of chamomile tea resting on her lap, ready for a night of binge-watching her favorite true crime series. Emma was a data analyst by day, and like many, she enjoyed the thrill of mysteries that unfolded on screen. Each twist and turn in her shows captivated her mind, but tonight, she was looking forward to unwinding. Just as she settled in, her phone buzzed violently on the coffee table, shattering the peaceful silence. Startled, Emma grabbed her phone, expecting a message from her friend Sarah, who was always sharing the latest gossip or meme. Instead, she was greeted by an unknown number. The message was short and unsettling. "I see you." Her heart raced, and a shiver ran down her spine. It was an odd message, one that felt more intrusive than a simple prank. She quickly typed a response, asking who it was, but there was no reply. A feeling of unease settled in the pit of her stomach, but she shook it off as a prank from one of her friends. After all, she had seen countless online jokes about unsettling messages. To distract herself, she decided to continue watching her show, but her mind was only half focused. The chilling words echoed in her thoughts. "I see you." Was someone really watching her? The feeling of vulnerability was unnerving. Emma tried to rationalize it, convincing herself that it was probably just a wrong number or a marketing scam gone awry. She turned her attention back to the screen, but a nagging feeling persisted. As she finished the episode, she decided to check her social media, hoping to find some solace in the familiarity of her friends' posts. Scrolling through the photos and updates, she tried to shake the feeling that someone was lurking in the shadows of her life. Then, the phone buzzed again. This time, her heart skipped a beat. She hesitated before checking the notification. It was another message from the same unknown number. "You shouldn't ignore me." Emma felt a rush of panic. She glanced around her apartment, the shadows seeming to stretch longer, the darkness pooling in corners that felt too empty. She wanted to call someone, but who would believe her? Wouldn't they think she was overreacting? She took a deep breath and called Sarah instead, needing to hear a familiar voice. "Hey, it's me. Can you come over?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. "Sure. Everything okay?" Sarah replied, her concern evident. "Yeah, just a weird message on my phone. I'd feel better if you were here." "I'll be there in 10. Emma hung up, feeling slightly reassured but still on edge. The clock ticked loudly in the silence, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As she waited, she opened the message thread again, her curiosity mixing with dread. The user picture was just a black silhouette, no indication of who this person could be. What kind of person would send such a message? She felt a mixture of anger and fear, wanting to confront whoever was behind this. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. She rushed to the door and swung it open, finding Sarah standing there with a curious smile, a half-eaten slice of pizza in hand. "Did you order food without me?" Sarah teased, stepping inside, but she immediately sensed something was off. "You look pale. What's going on?" Emma shut the door, leaning against it for support. "I got this weird message. It said, 'I see you.'" Sarah frowned, her smile fading. "That's creepy. Do you know who it is?" "No. It's from an unknown number. I've tried replying, but they won't tell me who they are." Emma replied, her voice shaky. "Let's look at it together. Maybe we can figure it out," Sarah suggested, pulling out her phone. They sat on the couch, Emma scrolling through the messages while Sarah looked on, frowning. "Could it be someone you know? Someone you've crossed paths with?" Sarah asked, her brow furrowing. "I don't know. I've been careful about who I give my number to. I don't have any enemies, as far as I know," Emma said, biting her lip. As they discussed the possibilities, the phone buzzed again, this time louder, almost demanding attention. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she glanced at the screen. Another message. "Why are you scared, Emma? You're not alone." A chill ran through her, and she felt her heart pounding in her chest. "What does it say?" Sarah leaned in, eyes wide. Emma hesitated before showing her the screen. "This." Sarah's expression shifted from concern to alarm. "This is not okay. You need to report this." "I don't even know who it is. What do I say?" "Someone messaged me saying they see me." "We'll figure it out together," Sarah reassured her. "But for now, let's turn off the lights and make sure the windows are locked. We can call the police if it gets worse." They moved through the apartment, checking each window and locking every door, all while trying to ignore the unsettling feeling in the pit of their stomachs. As they settled back on the couch, Emma's phone buzzed one last time. "I'm closer than you think," Emma gasped, dropping her phone as a wave of nausea washed over her. The reality of the situation crashed down on her. This wasn't just a prank. It was a threat. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, her voice a mix of fear and urgency. Emma swallowed hard, staring at the message on the floor. "They're here. They're really here." The room felt heavier with the weight of the words lingering in the air. Emma's heart raced, each thump echoing like a drum in the silence that followed the message. Sarah grabbed Emma's hand tightly, her grip offering some comfort amidst the rising tide of fear. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered, glancing toward the darkened windows, as if expecting to see someone lurking outside. "We should call the police," Emma said, her voice shaky. But even as she spoke, a part of her hesitated. What could they say? Someone texted me and said they see me. Can you help? It felt ridiculous, like a scene from a movie. But the reality of the situation was becoming all too clear. She felt hunted, as if the world had shifted, and she was now in a dangerous game of cat and mouse. "Let's just sit tight for a moment," Sarah suggested, her eyes darting around the room. "If we call the police, they'll ask questions. Let's see if we get anything else first. Maybe we can figure out who this is." Emma nodded reluctantly. She picked up her phone again, the glow of the screen illuminating her face in the dim light of the room. As if on cue, the phone buzzed yet again. She looked down, dread settling in her chest. "Do you really think the police can help? Look around, Emma. No one cares about you here. You're just another lost soul in a sea of faces," the message read. Emma felt a cold sweat break out across her forehead. It was as if the sender was in her mind, reading her thoughts and fears. "Who are you?" she typed, her fingers trembling. "Someone who knows you better than you think," came the reply, almost immediately. The way the messages were coming in so quickly felt invasive, as if they were waiting for her response, as if they were right there, watching her every move. "Okay, this isn't normal," Sarah said, panic rising in her voice. "We need to do something." Emma was about to respond when her phone buzzed again. "You're making a mistake. You don't want to know the truth." "Stop," Emma shouted, throwing the phone onto the couch as if it were a live snake. "I can't do this. I can't." Sarah squeezed her hand tighter. "We'll figure this out together. Just breathe, okay? Let's think this through." Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. What if it's someone I know? What if it's a friend messing with me? "I don't think friends send messages like this," Sarah replied, her voice grave. "But we can try to trace the number. Maybe it's from someone you know." Reluctantly, Emma nodded. She opened a search engine on her laptop, typing in the unknown number. As the results began to load, she felt a mix of hope and dread. What if they found something? What if it led to more questions than answers? "Nothing," Emma muttered after a few minutes of searching. "It's just a dead end. I don't recognize the number at all." "Try calling it," Sarah suggested, though her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "What?" "And give them the satisfaction of knowing I'm scared." Emma shot back, "Just to see if it rings through." "Maybe it's someone from your past," Sarah replied, her brow furrowed with concern. Emma weighed the idea. It felt like an invasion, but it could be the only way to gain some control over the situation. With a deep breath, she pressed the call button. The phone rang, each tone amplifying her anxiety. The line clicked, and a voice answered, low and distorted. "Hello." Emma's throat went dry. "Who is this?" she managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't you recognize me?" The voice was calm, but laced with an unsettling familiarity. "I'm right behind you." Emma's blood ran cold. She spun around, expecting to see someone standing there, but the room was empty. "What do you want?" she demanded, fear fueling her defiance. "I want you to remember," the voice replied, dripping with menace. "You can't run from the past, Emma. You'll never escape." With that, the line went dead. Emma dropped the phone, her breath coming in rapid gasps. "What happened?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear. Someone said they're behind me," Emma stammered, her mind racing. "I don't understand." "Okay, we need to leave now," Sarah said, standing up and pulling Emma with her. "Let's go to the police. They have to take this seriously." Emma felt a rush of adrenaline. "You're right. Let's go." As they made their way to the door, Emma's heart raced, but she felt a strange sense of resolve. They would confront this fear head-on, no matter how twisted it might be. As they stepped out into the dimly lit hallway of the apartment complex, a chill swept through the air, causing Emma to shiver. "Let's just stick together," Sarah said as they walked briskly toward the exit. The hallway felt different, the shadows deeper and more sinister than before. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a warning, amplifying the unease gnawing at Emma's stomach. As they reached the front door, Emma's phone buzzed again, the sound almost like a taunt in the silence. "Don't forget your keys," the message read. Emma froze, dread flooding her system. "They know we're leaving," she whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. "We need to hurry," Sarah urged, pushing the door open. They stepped into the cool night air, the sudden rush of fresh air bringing clarity to Emma's mind. But the oppressive feeling of being watched still lingered, a shadow that refused to leave her side. The night air was thick with tension as Emma and Sarah made their way down the street. Streetlights flickered above, casting eerie shadows that danced along the pavement. The world around them felt oddly distorted, as if every noise was magnified: the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, and their own hurried footsteps. Emma's mind raced as she replayed the chilling phone call. "What do you think they meant by 'you can't run from the past'?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know, but we have to get to the police station before we're followed," Sarah replied, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "We need to report everything, the messages, the calls. They have to take us seriously." "Right," Emma said, her heart pounding in sync with her footsteps. But doubt crept in. What if they think we're overreacting? What if they can't help? "Better to try than to do nothing," Sarah insisted. "We can't let fear control us." As they rounded the corner, the police station came into view, its lights shining brightly against the darkened street. A sense of relief washed over Emma, mixed with an underlying fear of what might happen when they entered. "Stay close," Sarah urged, grabbing Emma's arm as they approached the entrance. The two stepped inside, greeted by the familiar scent of coffee mingled with the sterile smell of the station. "Can I help you?" the officer at the front desk asked, looking up from a pile of paperwork. Emma swallowed hard, forcing herself to speak. "We need to report something strange that's been happening." The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly accustomed to the usual complaints. "What sort of strange?" Emma took a deep breath, recounting the messages and the phone call. Sarah chimed in with details, emphasizing the threat and their feeling of being watched. As they spoke, Emma watched the officer's expression shift from skepticism to concern. "Do you have the messages?" the officer asked, taking notes. Emma pulled out her phone, her hands shaking as she opened the thread. She felt a mix of vulnerability and anger, wishing she could just forget the whole thing. "Here," she said, showing the screen to the officer. "Okay, we'll need to file a report," he said, nodding. "I'll need your names and some details about your living situation. Have either of you experienced any other issues recently? Unexplained noises, break-ins, anything?" Emma glanced at Sarah, who shook her head. "No, but we feel like we're being watched. Someone texted me saying they were behind me," Emma added, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer's brow furrowed as he took their information. "I can't promise anything, but we'll look into it. I recommend you stay vigilant and avoid being alone until we can figure this out. If you receive any more messages, contact us immediately." Emma nodded, her heart still racing. "Thank you." As they left the station, the cool night air hit them like a wave. "What now?" Sarah asked, glancing around as if she expected to see someone lurking in the shadows. "I don't know," Emma replied, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Maybe we should head back to your place and wait it out. We can keep each other safe." "Sounds good," Sarah agreed, though her eyes darted around nervously. "Let's not take any back alleys." As they walked, the feeling of being followed crept back into Emma's mind. Every sound seemed amplified. Every shadow seemed to move. They hurried down the street, and for a moment, Emma felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they were safe now that they had involved the police. But as they turned a corner, Emma caught a glimpse of a figure in the distance. The figure stood still, partially obscured by a streetlight. Emma's heart raced again, pounding in her chest. "Sarah, do you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "See what?" Sarah asked, her brows furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "That guy, over there," Emma pointed, trying to steady her voice. "He's just standing there." "Emma, it's probably just someone waiting for a ride or something," Sarah said, though her voice lacked conviction. But as they approached, Emma could see that the figure was staring directly at them. The man was tall and cloaked in shadows, his features indistinguishable in the dim light. An uncomfortable feeling crept over her, a primal instinct that urged her to run. "Let's just keep walking," Emma suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. But Sarah stopped, looking back. "Wait, I think I recognize him. That's Leo." We went to high school together. Emma stopped in her tracks, her mind racing. Do you know him? I think so, but why is he just standing there? Sarah took a few cautious steps toward the man. As they drew closer, Emma could feel the weight of the man's gaze, and the atmosphere shifted. There was something unsettling about the way he stood, too still, too watchful. Emma's gut twisted with unease. Leo, Sarah called out, her voice shaky. The man stepped forward into the light, revealing his face, but something was off. His smile was too wide, stretching unnaturally across his features. Hey Sarah, I was just passing by, he said, his tone casual, but there was an underlying current that sent chills down Emma's spine. Why were you just standing there? Sarah asked, crossing her arms defensively. Just enjoying the night, he replied, his smile never faltering. But his eyes, they seemed to hold a darkness, a knowledge that made Emma feel exposed, as if he knew more than he was letting on. Emma stepped back instinctively, her heart racing. We should go, she murmured to Sarah, trying to pull her away. Yeah, we were just heading back home, Sarah replied, glancing between Emma and Leo. Where are you two off to? Leo asked, his voice friendly, but dripping with something sinister. Just home, Emma said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. We have to. Wait a second. Did you two happen to receive any interesting messages tonight? Leo interrupted, his eyes narrowing slightly. Emma's stomach dropped. What do you mean? I mean, there are some people out there who like to play games. Just be careful, okay? He tilted his head slightly, as if studying her reaction. Emma felt her breath hitch in her throat. What are you talking about? Nothing to worry about, Leo replied too smoothly, his grin growing wider. Just keep your eyes open. You never know who might be watching. Without waiting for a response, Leo turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Emma and Sarah stood in stunned silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling heavily between them. What the hell was that? Emma finally breathed, her heart racing. I don't know, Sarah said, her eyes wide with confusion. But we should definitely get home. They turned and hurried back towards Sarah's apartment, the chilling encounter lingering in their minds. Emma felt the oppressive weight of fear settle back over her, like a heavy blanket. As they reached the entrance of Sarah's building, Emma glanced back, half expecting to see Leo standing there, watching them. But the street was empty, the shadows stretching ominously around them. They stepped inside, locking the door behind them. Let's just stay inside and keep the lights on, Emma suggested, her voice shaky. Yeah, I'll grab some snacks, Sarah said, heading toward the kitchen. Emma settled onto the couch, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that the night was far from over. The phone buzzed again, and Emma jumped. What now? She muttered to herself, picking it up to see another message from the unknown number. You've just begun to scratch the surface, Emma. Don't you want to know the truth? Emma's heart sank. She glanced toward the kitchen, where Sarah was rummaging through the pantry. With a deep breath, she typed back, "What truth?" The reply was instant. The truth about what really happened. The tension in the room thickened as Emma stared at her phone, her heart pounding. Each second felt like an eternity as she awaited the reply. The shadows in Sarah's apartment seemed to deepen, and every creak of the building echoed ominously in her ears. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, emerging from the kitchen with a handful of snacks. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "It's just the messages," Emma said, holding up her phone for Sarah to see. "I got another one. It says, the truth about what really happened." "What truth?" Sarah's brow furrowed as she leaned closer to Emma. "Do you think it's someone messing with you?" "I don't know," Emma whispered, a chill running down her spine. "But I have a feeling it's connected to Leo somehow." "Leo? The guy from earlier?" Sarah frowned, taking a seat beside Emma. "That's really creepy. Do you think he knows something about the messages?" "I don't know, but he seemed to be implying that there's something more going on," Emma replied, feeling her pulse quicken. "I don't like this." As they sat in silence, the phone buzzed again, jolting Emma from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, her heart dropping at the new message. "Don't ignore the signs, Emma. They're everywhere if you just look." "What the hell?" Sarah said, her voice trembling. "This is getting really weird. Maybe we should call the police again." Emma shook her head. "What'll we tell them? That we got a series of cryptic messages and someone we barely know just warned us? They'll think we're overreacting. Still, we can't just sit here, Sarah insisted, her eyes wide with concern. What if it's serious? Emma took a deep breath, the weight of the night settling heavily on her shoulders. Maybe we should try to figure out what Leo meant. He seemed to know something. Okay, so what do we do? Sarah asked, nibbling nervously on a piece of popcorn. Let's see if we can find out more about him, Emma suggested. Maybe we can search for him on social media or see if we have mutual friends. If he's hiding something, maybe there are clues. Sarah nodded, her determination rising. That makes sense. Let's check. They pulled out their phones and began to search for Leo. Emma's fingers danced over the screen, searching his name. It wasn't long before she found his profile. There he is, Emma said, tapping on the picture. He looks different than I remember. I can't tell if it's a good or bad thing. What do you mean? Sarah leaned in closer, peering at the screen. There's something unsettling about his expression, Emma replied, scrolling through his photos. Like he's always hiding something. And look at this, he's tagged in a lot of photos from parties and gatherings, but there's no recent activity. That is strange, Sarah noted, scrolling through the posts. It's like he just disappeared. As they continued to dig through Leo's profile, they stumbled upon a post that made Emma's stomach drop. It was an old photo of a group of friends at a party, and in the background, a figure loomed, half hidden in shadow. Wait, go back, Emma said, pointing to the photo. Look at that guy standing behind them. Sarah squinted at the image. What about him? He looks familiar. I think I've seen him before, Emma said, her heart racing. But I can't quite place where. Could he be another friend of Leo's? Sarah suggested. Emma's mind raced. Or maybe he's someone from our past, someone who doesn't want us to remember. The photo made Emma feel uneasy, as if the figure in the shadows was watching them even now. We need to know who he is, Emma said, her fingers flying over the screen. Let's see if there are any comments that mention him. They scrolled down the post, searching through the comments, but there were only generic praises for the party and jokes between friends. Disappointed, Emma leaned back, rubbing her temples. This isn't getting us anywhere, she sighed. What if we asked Leo directly? Sarah suggested. We could message him and see if he responds. Maybe he'll give us answers. Emma hesitated. What if he doesn't respond? Or worse, what if he does, and it's even creepier? We can't let fear control us, remember? Sarah said, her tone reassuring. Let's just send him a message. What's the worst that could happen? Taking a deep breath, Emma typed out a message. Hey Leo, it's Emma. We were wondering about that conversation earlier, and what you meant by your warning. Can you tell us more? After hitting send, they both sat in silence, staring at the screen. Emma's heart raced as the seconds ticked by. The weight of anticipation filled the air, and every moment felt charged with a sense of dread. Finally, the screen lit up with a response, and Emma's heart raced. He replied. What did he say? Sarah leaned closer, her eyes wide with anxiety. It's not safe for you to know too much. Just forget everything and stay away from what you don't understand. What does that mean? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma felt the chill of fear creeping back in. I don't know, but I don't think we can just ignore this anymore. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside the apartment. Emma jumped to her feet, adrenaline flooding her veins. What was that? I don't know, Sarah replied, her face pale. It sounded like it came from outside. Emma's heart raced as they both moved cautiously toward the door. We should check. It might be someone trying to get in. Are you sure? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Let's just take a look, Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. They crept to the door, peeking through the peephole. The hallway was dimly lit, but everything seemed still. No one was in sight. Maybe it was just a trash can falling or something? Sarah suggested, her voice shaking. Let's just wait here for a moment, Emma said, pressing her ear against the door. Just as she was about to turn away, she heard a soft whisper coming from the other side. Help me. Emma's heart dropped, and she turned to Sarah, wide-eyed. Did you hear that? What? Sarah looked alarmed. Someone's out there, and they need help, Emma whispered. We can't open the door, Sarah said firmly. What if it's a trick? What if it's someone trying to lure us out? But Emma was already unlocking the door, her curiosity overpowering her fear. I have to know who it is. Emma, wait, Sarah shouted, but it was too late. Emma swung the door open, the hinges creaking ominously. The hallway was empty, but there, just at the edge of the shadows, stood a figure, a young woman, her face pale and gaunt, eyes wide with desperation. Help me, the woman whispered again, stepping forward into the dim light. Emma's heart raced as she took a step back, uncertainty flooding her mind. Who are you? The woman looked around, her gaze darting nervously. They're coming for you. You need to hide. Who's coming? What do you mean? Emma demanded, the urgency in her voice rising. I can't explain. Just trust me. You're in danger, the woman insisted, her voice trembling. Emma glanced back at Sarah, who was frozen in shock, eyes wide. The woman stepped closer, desperation etched into her features. Please, you have to listen. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and a low rumble echoed through the building. What is happening? Sarah gasped, her voice filled with fear. I don't know, Emma admitted, panic gripping her chest. But we need to get out of here. Now, the woman nodded, her expression frantic. Follow me. You have to trust me. Without thinking, Emma grabbed Sarah's hand, and they stepped into the hallway, following the mysterious woman into the unknown. The hallway stretched before them, dark and foreboding, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. Emma felt a mix of fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins as they hurried after the woman. Sarah stayed close, her grip on Emma's hand tightening. Where are we going? Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. To safety, the woman replied, glancing back over her shoulder. Her eyes were wide with urgency, filled with a desperate glimmer. I can't explain everything now, but you need to trust me. They reached a stairwell that spiraled down into the depths of the building. The woman pushed the door open, the rusty hinges creaking ominously. This way, she urged, leading them down the narrow staircase. With each step, Emma could feel her heart pounding in her chest, echoing in her ears. The air grew colder, and an unsettling silence enveloped them, broken only by the sound of their hurried footsteps. What is going on? Sarah asked, her voice trembling as they descended. Who are you? My name is Rachel, the woman said, glancing back at them. I used to live here. You have to understand, something terrible is happening in this building. It's not safe for you. Why? What's going on? Emma pressed, trying to catch up to her, as they reached the bottom of the staircase. Rachel hesitated, her eyes flickering with a mix of fear and resolve. There are things here, things that don't want you to find out the truth. You've already seen too much. Seen what? Emma questioned, confusion rising in her mind. What truth? Before Rachel could respond, the ground beneath them trembled, and a loud crash echoed through the stairwell. The lights flickered violently, and dust fell from the ceiling. Quick! Rachel shouted, urging them forward. We have to keep moving. They ran through a dimly lit hallway, where the air felt heavier, almost suffocating. Emma could hear distant sounds echoing, a mix of whispers and what seemed like muffled cries. It sent chills down her spine. Where are we going? Sarah gasped, panting heavily as they rushed after Rachel. There's a safe room, Rachel said, her voice urgent. It's a place where we can hide and figure things out. But we need to hurry before they find us. Who will find us? Emma pressed, but Rachel only shook her head. Just trust me, she pleaded. They turned a corner and stumbled into a small, dimly lit room. Rachel quickly shut the door behind them, locking it with a shaky hand. The room was cluttered with old furniture, boxes, and what looked like remnants of someone's forgotten life. A single window was covered with heavy curtains, blocking out the light. Rachel gestured for them to sit down. We need to stay quiet and wait, she whispered, her eyes darting around the room. What is happening? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel took a deep breath, her expression grave. There's a group, people who want to keep the past buried. They'll do anything to protect their secrets. What secrets? Emma urged, leaning forward. Rachel hesitated, glancing toward the door as if she expected someone to burst in at any moment. Years ago, something terrible happened in this building. People went missing, and there were rumors of dark rituals. I thought it was just a legend, but now, I'm not so sure. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. What does that have to do with us? They're targeting people who start digging into the past. You got those messages for a reason, Rachel explained, her voice low and urgent. You need to stay away from Leo. He's not who you think he is. What do you mean? Sarah asked, her eyes wide. Leo has connections to those who want to keep everything hidden, Rachel continued, her gaze intense. If he's involved, then you're in even more danger than you realize. Emma felt her stomach drop. But why did he warn us? Why send those messages? He might be trying to protect you, Rachel replied, biting her lip. Or he might be trying to keep you from uncovering something he doesn't want you to know. As they sat in the dim light of the room, a sudden noise made them jump. A heavy thud against the door, followed by a sinister whisper that sent chills down Emma's spine. Let us in. Emma exchanged worried glances with Sarah and Rachel, panic rising within her. What do we do? She whispered, her voice shaking. We need to be quiet, Rachel urged, her eyes wide with fear. They'll know we're here if we make a sound. Emma held her breath, the room feeling suffocating as the whispering grew louder, echoing in her ears. We know you're in there. You can't hide forever. Rachel pressed her finger to her lips, signaling for them to remain silent. Emma could feel her heart racing, the reality of their situation crashing down on her. They were trapped, and whatever was outside the door was intent on getting in. Just then, Rachel's phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the tense silence. Emma's eyes widened as Rachel quickly pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It's a message from Leo, she said, her voice barely audible. Don't open it, Emma urged, fear gripping her heart. What if he's one of them? But Rachel was already reading the message, her face paling as she took in the words. It says, you're in danger. They know where you are. What? How? Emma gasped, panic flooding her mind. They can't know we're here, right? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Rachel shook her head, her expression grim. They must have been watching us. We need to get out of here. Now. Where do we go? Emma asked, her mind racing. There's another exit through the back of this building, Rachel explained quickly. It leads to the alley behind us. We can slip away unnoticed. The pounding on the door intensified, and Emma felt the fear clawing at her insides. We have to hurry. Rachel moved to the back of the room, pushing aside a heavy curtain that concealed a small door. This way. Follow me. Emma and Sarah scrambled to their feet, fear propelling them forward as they rushed through the hidden door behind Rachel. As they stepped out into the darkness, Emma could hear the whispers growing fainter behind them. But the night was still filled with uncertainty, and every shadow felt like a threat. Where to now? Sarah asked, looking around nervously. Rachel hesitated, scanning the alley. We need to find a place to hide and regroup. They'll be looking for us. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. What if we can't get away? What if they find us? We will, Rachel said firmly. We just have to stick together and keep moving. With that, they stepped into the darkness of the alley, ready to face whatever lay ahead, unaware of the shadows that watched from the corners, waiting for the moment to strike. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The old house loomed at the end of Willow Lane, its once vibrant paint now peeling and faded, consumed by the relentless march of time. Ivy crawled up the walls, weaving through the broken windows like fingers grasping for something long lost. Lucy had moved into the house just a few weeks ago, excited to start anew in the quaint town of Eldridge. But the moment she set foot inside, a chill ran down her spine, as if the air itself whispered secrets she wasn't meant to hear. Mom, can I explore the attic? Lucy called out, her voice echoing through the empty halls. Her mother, Sarah, was unpacking boxes in the living room, her back turned. Just be careful, Lucy. We don't know what's up there. Lucy grinned, feeling a surge of adventure. The attic had always fascinated her, a realm of possibilities filled with forgotten treasures. As she climbed the narrow staircase leading to the attic, a feeling of anticipation bubbled inside her. The old wooden steps creaked beneath her weight, as if warning her to turn back, but her curiosity pushed her forward. When she finally reached the attic door, it creaked open with a gentle nudge. Dust danced in the beams of sunlight streaming through the small window, illuminating the cluttered space. Boxes piled high, cobwebs hanging like curtains, and forgotten furniture draped in white sheets surrounded her. "Wow," Lucy whispered, stepping inside. She felt as if she had stepped into a different world, one filled with the echoes of lives once lived. She began to rummage through the boxes, pulling out old toys, dusty books, and yellowed photographs. Each item told a story, but one box, smaller than the others, caught her eye. It was tucked away in the corner, half hidden beneath a pile of old blankets. With a sense of urgency, Lucy pulled it free and opened it. Inside, she found a collection of small dolls, their glassy eyes staring blankly into the void. They were intricately designed, each one unique, but there was something unsettling about them, an eerie quality that sent shivers down her spine. "Maybe I can clean them up," she thought, dismissing her unease. She gently lifted one of the dolls, examining it closely, when she heard a faint sound. "Help me!" Lucy froze, her heart racing. The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it was unmistakable. She looked around the attic, her gaze darting from corner to corner. "Hello," she called, her voice shaking. Silence. Taking a deep breath, Lucy shook her head, convincing herself it was just her imagination. Maybe the house creaked or groaned from its old age. She was about to turn back to the dolls when she heard it again, clearer this time. "Help me! Who's there?" Lucy shouted, a mix of fear and determination rising within her. The air felt thick and heavy, and she could almost hear her heartbeat echoing in the silence. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, a child, pale and translucent, with wild hair and wide, sorrowful eyes. Lucy gasped, stumbling back, clutching the doll tightly to her chest. "Please help me," the child said, their voice a mere breath, filled with an overwhelming sadness. "What do you want?" Lucy asked, her voice trembling. The child pointed toward the far wall of the attic. "I need to be found. I'm lost." Lucy's heart raced as she felt a chill sweep through the room. "Who are you?" she whispered, taking a cautious step forward. "I'm Emily," the child replied, her eyes filled with tears. "I used to live here, but no one remembers me. I need you to remember." "Remember what?" Lucy asked, confused and frightened. "The story, the forgotten story." Emily's voice faded, and her form flickered like a candle in the wind. "You must find it." "Wait!" Lucy shouted, reaching out as the child began to fade into the shadows. "Don't go!" But it was too late. Emily vanished, leaving Lucy alone in the attic, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Lucy stood frozen, clutching the doll tightly, her mind racing. Who was Emily? Why did she need her help? The attic felt colder now, the shadows creeping in around her. She could feel the gravity of a mystery unfolding, one that called to her, a story waiting to be uncovered. Determined to find out more, Lucy took a deep breath, shaking off her fear. She had to discover Emily's story, to unravel the threads of the past that connected them. As she glanced back at the pile of dolls, she made a decision. "I'll help you, Emily," she vowed softly. "I'll find your story." Lucy descended from the attic, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. The weight of Emily's plea lingered in her mind, urging her to dig deeper into the mysteries of the old house. The dusty dolls were no longer mere toys. They were symbols of a forgotten past, and she felt an undeniable connection to the spirit of the child who had once called this place home. "Mom, I think I found something in the attic," Lucy shouted as she hurried down the stairs. Her mother looked up from her work, raising an eyebrow. "What did you find, sweetheart?" Lucy hesitated, not sure how to explain the spectral encounter she had just experienced. Instead, she held up one of the dolls, its porcelain face gazing back at her with a haunting expression. "Just some old dolls, but I think there's a story behind them." Sarah smiled, taking a closer look at the doll. "They are quite beautiful, Lucy. Maybe they belong to the previous owner. You should clean them up and display them." Lucy nodded but felt the weight of Emily's sadness. "I think there's more to it than that. I want to learn about the family who lived here before us." Her mother's expression softened. "That sounds like a great idea. Maybe we can find some old records at the town hall or talk to the neighbors." As the day progressed, Lucy could hardly focus on unpacking. The attic called to her like a siren's song, its secrets whispering through the walls. After dinner, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She would uncover the truth about Emily and the mysterious family who had lived in her new home. With a notebook and pen in hand, Lucy returned to the attic. The air felt thick with anticipation, and the doll seemed to watch her every move. She set her things down and began jotting down notes about Emily and the haunting encounter. "Okay, Emily," she said, glancing at the dolls. "Let's find your story." Lucy began her investigation by examining the attic more closely. She moved aside the boxes and dust-covered sheets, searching for anything that might hold a clue. A wooden trunk tucked in a shadowy corner caught her eye, its brass latch rusted but intact. With a surge of determination, Lucy approached the trunk and knelt beside it. She took a deep breath and pulled at the latch. The trunk creaked open, revealing a collection of old letters, photographs, and a diary that looked well-worn and filled with stories. As she sifted through the contents, Lucy's heart raced. The first letter she unfolded was dated from the early 1900s, written in elegant script. It spoke of a family living in the house, a mother, father, and their little girl, Emily. "Dear Mary," the letter began, "I cannot express how much I miss you and the children. The autumn leaves have turned, and the air grows colder. I fear for Emily's health. The doctor says she needs more sunshine and fresh air. Perhaps you could come to visit." Lucy's breath caught in her throat. This was the Emily she had met, the very same name. She continued reading, captivated by the words that painted a picture of a loving family. But as she delved deeper, the letters took a darker turn. They spoke of strange happenings in the house, whispers in the night, shadows moving in the corners of the rooms, and the little girl's growing illness. The final letter was heartbreaking. It was written in a shaky hand, filled with desperation. "My dear husband, I fear for Emily. She claims she hears voices from the attic, calling to her. I do not know how to help her. Please come home soon. I cannot do this alone." Lucy's heart sank. She realized that Emily had been lonely and frightened, trapped in a world where no one could hear her cries for help. The attic was a prison of sorts, filled with echoes of a forgotten past. Just then, a draft swept through the attic, sending chills down her spine. The air shifted, and Lucy felt a familiar presence beside her. "Emily," she whispered, looking around. "Help me," came the faint echo of the child's voice. Lucy grabbed the diary, flipping through its pages frantically until she found a passage that struck her. A drawing of a child in an attic, surrounded by dolls, just like the one she found. It was signed Emily. The connection was undeniable. Lucy now understood that Emily had not just vanished. She had been trapped, her spirit lingering in the house, waiting for someone to listen to her story and to help her find peace. "Emily, I promise I will help you," Lucy vowed, clutching the diary close to her heart. "I will find out what happened to you and your family. I won't let your story fade away." As the shadows danced around her, Lucy felt a newfound sense of purpose. She had to learn more about the family, the house, and the tragic events that had unfolded within its walls. It was time to confront the past and uncover the truth that had been buried for so long. With the diary clutched tightly in her hands, Lucy felt an overwhelming urge to uncover the truth about Emily and the family that had once lived in her home. The words of the letters echoed in her mind, driving her forward with a sense of purpose. She needed to understand the events that had led to Emily's despair and the haunting presence that still lingered in the attic. The next morning, Lucy gathered her courage and approached her mother over breakfast. "Mom, I found something in the attic last night. It's about the family who used to live here, specifically a girl named Emily." Her mother looked intrigued, pausing mid-bite. "What did you find?" Lucy took a deep breath, her heart racing. "I found letters in a diary. They talk about Emily and how she heard voices and felt afraid. I think something terrible happened to her." Sarah's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "That sounds serious, Lucy. Are you sure you want to delve into this? It could be unsettling." "I have to," Lucy insisted, her determination hardening. "I feel like Emily needs me to help her. I need to know what happened." After breakfast, Lucy decided to visit the local library. The town had a rich history, and she hoped to find more records about the family who had lived in her house. She grabbed the diary and letters and set off on her bike, her mind racing with thoughts of Emily. Upon arriving at the library, Lucy was greeted by Mrs. Wilkins, the elderly librarian who had seen generations of families come and go. Her silver hair framed a kind face, and her glasses perched on the tip of her nose. "Good morning, Lucy. What brings you here today?" Mrs. Wilkins asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "I'm looking for information about a family that lived in my house a long time ago," Lucy replied. "Their names were, I think it was the Harris family. There was a little girl named Emily." Mrs. Wilkins's expression shifted, and she nodded knowingly. "Ah, yes, the Harris family. A tragic story, that one. They lived in that house over a century ago." Lucy's heart raced. What happened to them? With a sigh, Mrs. Wilkins motioned for Lucy to follow her to a quiet reading room filled with dusty books and faded photographs. She pulled out a worn-out folder and handed it to Lucy. "This is all the information I could find about them. It's a story worth telling." Lucy opened the folder and scanned through the documents. There were newspaper clippings, photographs of the Harris family, and a few reports from neighbors. Her breath caught in her throat as she found a photo of Emily, her smiling face framed by golden curls. It was a stark contrast to the sadness that had surrounded her spirit. One newspaper clipping caught Lucy's attention. It was dated many years ago and detailed a tragic event. Local girl vanishes. Family left devastated. The article recounted how Emily had mysteriously disappeared one night, leaving her parents heartbroken. The article mentioned that her father, John Harris, had searched for her tirelessly, but ultimately succumbed to despair. Despite extensive searches, no trace of the little girl was ever found. The article concluded, a chilling reminder of the family's loss. Lucy felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Emily had been so alone, lost to a world that had forgotten her. But why was her spirit still lingering in the attic? What had happened to her after she disappeared? With determination, Lucy delved deeper into the folder. Another report spoke of strange occurrences in the Harris house, detailing how neighbors reported hearing laughter and cries echoing through the walls long after Emily's disappearance. "They say the house is haunted," a neighbor recounted. "The child's spirit never left." Haunted, Lucy whispered to herself. The truth was becoming clearer. Emily was still searching for something, a way to be heard, a way to find peace. She spent the entire afternoon poring over the documents, piecing together the Harris family's tragic story. It became evident that the more she learned, the stronger the connection she felt to Emily. The little girl had been a vibrant spirit trapped in an unimaginable situation, longing for love and understanding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the library, Lucy closed the folder and thanked Mrs. Wilkins for her help. "I'll keep digging," she said, her resolve unshakable. With the diary, letters, and newfound information in hand, Lucy returned home, eager to piece together the remaining threads of Emily's life. As she entered her house, she felt a comforting presence, as if Emily was walking alongside her, guiding her through the darkness. Later that evening, Lucy settled back into the attic, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation. She lit a small candle and opened the diary, hoping to uncover more of Emily's thoughts. "Dear Diary," she read aloud. "Today I heard the voices again. They tell me to come and play, but I'm not sure if I should. Mother says I must be careful." The entries revealed Emily's loneliness, her desire for companionship, and the fear that had begun to consume her. Each page turned felt like a glimpse into the soul of a little girl trapped in a world of shadows. "Emily, I'm here," Lucy whispered softly. "I want to help you. I won't let your story be forgotten." As Lucy read on, she felt a strange energy enveloping her, as if the very walls of the attic were alive with Emily's spirit. The dolls, once eerie, now seemed to nod in agreement, their porcelain faces reflecting the flickering candlelight. The next entry was dated shortly before her disappearance. "I'm afraid. The voices are getting louder. I feel like I'm being watched. I want to go outside, but I don't know if I can." Tears filled Lucy's eyes. Emily had been frightened and alone, yearning for a life she could no longer have. Suddenly, a chill swept through the attic, causing the candle flame to flicker violently. Lucy looked up, her heart racing. "Emily, are you here?" A soft whisper echoed in the air, barely audible but undeniably present. "Help me." Lucy's heart ached with empathy. "I will. I promise." The darkness around her felt heavy, but Lucy knew that she was no longer alone in her quest. Emily's spirit was guiding her, leading her toward the truth that had long been buried in the shadows. That night, Lucy found it hard to sleep. The echoes of Emily's whispers resonated in her mind, intertwining with her own thoughts as she lay in bed. She felt an urgency to uncover the truth, not just for Emily, but for herself. She knew that their lives were somehow connected, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the attic held more secrets waiting to be unveiled. As dawn broke, casting soft light through her bedroom window, Lucy made her way back to the attic. Armed with a flashlight and the diary, she climbed the creaky stairs, each step amplifying her determination. Today, she was resolved to face whatever shadows lurked within the dusty corners. Once in the attic, she settled herself in front of the doll collection. Their glassy eyes seemed to watch her intently as she opened the diary again. The pages fluttered slightly in the morning breeze, inviting her to delve deeper into Emily's world. "Today, I feel stronger," she read. "I met a boy named Thomas in the garden. He says he can hear the whispers, too. He understands me." Lucy paused, intrigued. Who was Thomas, she wondered. The mention of a friend brought a glimmer of hope to Emily's otherwise somber entries. The next entry revealed more. Thomas is different from the others. He isn't afraid of the whispers. He says they come from the forest, and if we listen closely, they'll guide us to something wonderful. I want to believe him. The more Lucy read, the more questions arose. Who was this boy, and what had happened to him? The attic was filled with a tension that was almost palpable, as if the air itself was charged with anticipation. As she flipped through the diary, Lucy found a small sketch tucked between the pages, a drawing of a treehouse nestled among the branches of an enormous oak. It was a beautiful illustration, filled with detail, and it seemed to pulse with a sense of adventure. Could this be where Emily and Thomas played? Lucy mused. She felt a strong pull toward the image, as if it were a key to unlocking the mysteries surrounding Emily's life. With renewed purpose, she decided to explore the backyard. Her family's property had always seemed ordinary, but now it felt like a treasure trove of secrets waiting to be discovered. Lucy stepped outside, the crisp morning air invigorating her senses. As she reached the backyard, her eyes were immediately drawn to the towering oak tree that stood proudly in the corner. Its branches swayed gently, beckoning her closer. Lucy approached the tree, feeling an inexplicable connection to it. "This is it," she whispered, examining the tree closely. The tree from the drawing. Looking around, she noticed a tangle of vines and overgrown grass at its base. Lucy knelt down, brushing away the debris to reveal a small, weathered door partially hidden within the tree's trunk. Her heart raced with excitement and fear. Could this lead to the treehouse? She wondered. Taking a deep breath, she reached for the door and pulled it open. A dark, narrow tunnel extended into the heart of the tree, and Lucy's pulse quickened with curiosity. "Emily," she called softly into the darkness. "Is this where you and Thomas played?" The only answer was the rustling of leaves above, but Lucy felt a gentle pull urging her to go inside. Climbing through the opening, she found herself enveloped in darkness. She turned on her flashlight, the beam cutting through the shadows. The tunnel was cramped, with roots intertwining overhead, but Lucy pressed on, fueled by the thrill of discovery. The air was thick with the earthy scent of wood and damp soil. After a few moments, the tunnel widened, and Lucy found herself in a small clearing illuminated by shafts of light filtering through cracks in the tree's bark. In the center stood a tiny treehouse, just as Emily had sketched. It was rustic and unkempt, but Lucy felt a wave of warmth wash over her. This had been a sanctuary for Emily and Thomas, a place where they could escape the world and its worries. Climbing the rickety ladder, Lucy stepped into the treehouse, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Inside, she found remnants of the past, old toys, scraps of fabric, and a weathered blanket strewn across the wooden floor. As she explored the space, Lucy felt a sense of belonging wash over her. The walls were adorned with drawings, many depicting scenes of laughter and friendship. It was a world untouched by the sadness that had enveloped Emily's life. Sitting on the floor, Lucy traced her fingers over a drawing of two children playing in the sun. It was a beautiful moment captured in time, one that radiated joy. "Emily, this was your happy place," Lucy whispered. "You were not alone here." In that moment, she felt a profound connection to Emily's spirit. Lucy understood that the treehouse had been a refuge, a place where Emily had found solace amidst the chaos of her life. It was here that she and Thomas had shared dreams, hopes, and laughter, away from the fears that haunted them. But then a dark thought crept in. What had happened to Thomas? Why had Emily been left alone in the end? As if in response to her questions, a faint whisper echoed in the air. "Help us." Lucy's heart raced, the urgency in the voice undeniable. "What do you need? How can I help?" She closed her eyes, trying to center herself. "I'll find out what happened to both of you. I promise." Determined, Lucy decided to search the treehouse for any clues about Thomas and what may have led to Emily's disappearance. She rifled through the old toys and forgotten trinkets, hoping to uncover the secrets of their friendship. Suddenly, she found a small, dusty box tucked away in a corner. Opening it carefully, Lucy gasped as she uncovered a collection of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. Her hands trembled with excitement as she pulled them out, recognizing the familiar handwriting. "Dear Emily," she read aloud, the words pouring out like a long-lost memory. "I can't wait for our next adventure. The whispers in the forest say there's a hidden treasure waiting for us. Let's find it together." Tears filled Lucy's eyes as she realized these letters were from Thomas. The connection between them was strong, transcending time and loss. She continued reading, her heart aching for the innocent dreams and boundless hope expressed in each line. The final letter sent a chill down her spine. "But I'm scared, Emily. The voices tell me not to go too far. They say there's danger out there. Promise me you'll be careful." Lucy's breath hitched as she pieced together the fragments of their story. The whispers had been a warning, a plea for caution. Whatever had happened to them, it stemmed from the very essence of the world they inhabited, one filled with dreams and shadows. "Emily, I will uncover the truth," Lucy vowed, clutching the letters tightly. "You are not forgotten." With renewed resolve, she gathered the letters and the sketches, promising to honor the memories of Emily and Thomas. As she left the treehouse, Lucy felt an inexplicable weight lifting from her heart. She was not just uncovering a past filled with tragedy. She was reclaiming a story that deserved to be told. Lucy returned to the attic with the letters and sketches, feeling a mixture of determination and trepidation. Each step felt like a commitment to uncovering the truths that had been buried for so long. The attic, once a place of fear and uncertainty, now felt like a sanctuary filled with stories waiting to be told. She spread out the letters and sketches on the floor, carefully examining each one. The attic's dim light cast soft shadows around her, enhancing the mystery that surrounded Emily and Thomas. As she pieced together the fragments of their lives, Lucy felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Their story deserved to be honored, to be shared with the world. With a deep breath, she picked up the first letter again and began to read it aloud, letting her voice echo through the attic. "Dear Emily, I can't wait for our next adventure." The words spilled out, vibrant and alive. As she read, something strange began to happen. The air in the attic shifted, becoming charged with energy. A faint breeze swept through the room, and for a moment, Lucy thought she heard soft giggles, the laughter of children echoing through time. She paused, looking around, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. "Emily? Thomas?" she called softly, her voice trembling with anticipation. "Is that you?" Silence answered her, but the warmth in the room seemed to wrap around her like a comforting blanket. It was as if their spirits were present, listening, urging her to continue. Fueled by an unshakable instinct, Lucy gathered her notes and letters and decided to reach out to the local historical society. Perhaps they had records or knowledge about Emily and Thomas, or the events that led to their untimely separation. The following day, she set out for the Historical Society, her heart racing with excitement. The sun shone brightly, casting an optimistic glow over the town, and Lucy felt invigorated by the possibilities ahead. Inside the small building, she was greeted by an elderly woman named Mrs. Peterson, whose silver hair framed a kind face. "How can I help you, dear?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "I'm looking for information about two children, Emily and Thomas," Lucy explained, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "They used to live here, and I believe their story is tied to my family." Mrs. Peterson's expression shifted, her brows knitting together in thought. "Emily? Thomas? I remember whispers about them. Tragic stories often surround the past, dear. Come, let's see what we can find." Lucy followed Mrs. Peterson to a dusty archive room filled with rows of filing cabinets and shelves stacked with old books. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper, and Lucy felt as if she were stepping into another time. After what felt like hours of searching through the archives, Mrs. Peterson pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping. "Here it is," she said, laying it carefully on the table. "This article is from years ago, detailing a disappearance that shocked the community." Lucy's heart raced as she read the headline. "Local children go missing. Search parties formed." The article detailed the mysterious circumstances surrounding Emily and Thomas's disappearance, describing the frantic search efforts and the community's heartbreak. "Many believe they wandered into the woods near the old oak tree," Mrs. Peterson explained, her voice low. "The whispers in the forest drew them in, but they never returned. Some say they were taken by the shadows, while others believe they found a secret place where time stands still." Lucy's breath caught in her throat. "The whispers, they were warnings," she murmured, piecing together the puzzle of Emily and Thomas's fate. They were searching for something, but they didn't know the danger that awaited them. Mrs. Peterson nodded solemnly. "It said that the spirits of lost children linger near the oak tree. If you listen closely, you might still hear their laughter or their cries for help." Determined to uncover the truth, Lucy thanked Mrs. Peterson and headed back home. She needed to confront the whispers, to delve deeper into the mystery that had ensnared her family for so long. That night, as darkness enveloped the town, Lucy climbed back into the attic. She placed the newspaper clipping alongside the letters, feeling the weight of the stories pressing against her. "I won't let you be forgotten," she whispered into the quiet, her resolve firm. With the flashlight in hand, she decided to explore the attic further. There had to be more clues hidden among the forgotten treasures of her family. As she moved deeper into the shadows, her heart raced with anticipation. Suddenly, her light flickered, illuminating a corner she hadn't noticed before. There, partially concealed by a stack of old boxes, was a dusty trunk. Its lock was rusted, and the wood was worn, but something about it called to her. "What secrets do you hold?" Lucy asked, her fingers brushing against the surface of the trunk. With a gentle tug, she pried it open, revealing a trove of memories. Inside were old toys, faded photographs, and a delicate porcelain doll, one that looked eerily similar to Emily's favorite doll from the attic. Lucy's heart raced as she rummaged through the trunk, pulling out a faded photograph of a family gathering. The children in the picture looked so happy, their faces lit with joy. Among them, Lucy recognized Emily and Thomas, their smiles radiant and carefree. But then she noticed a figure in the background, a shadowy outline that seemed out of place, watching from the edges of the photograph. It sent a shiver down her spine. "Who are you?" she whispered to the figure, feeling a sense of dread creeping in. As she examined the photograph closer, the atmosphere around her shifted. The air grew cold, and she felt a presence lurking just behind her. Lucy spun around, heart racing, but the attic was empty. "Just my imagination," she reassured herself, though doubt gnawed at her. She returned to the photograph, intent on deciphering its secrets. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from the corner of the attic, causing Lucy to jump. The trunk slammed shut on its own, and her flashlight flickered ominously, plunging her into darkness. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice quaking. As if in response, she heard a faint whisper, clear yet distant. "Help us." Lucy's heart raced, the chilling reality of her situation sinking in. She was not alone, and the shadows had a story to tell. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The whispers surrounding the abandoned house on Willow Lane were as thick as the vines creeping up its once vibrant walls. For years, it had stood untouched, a haunting silhouette against the backdrop of an overcast sky. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the family that had lived there, once vibrant and full of life, now reduced to mere shadows in the town's memory. Among those captivated by the stories was Emma, a curious young woman with an insatiable thirst for adventure. Ever since she was a child, she had been drawn to the house, its mysteries beckoning her like a moth to a flame. Now, at 25, she was determined to uncover the truth behind the heart-wrenching rumors. Did you hear about the young girl who lived there? They say she vanished without a trace, her friend Max had said over coffee one morning, his eyes wide with intrigue. Emma had felt a chill run down her spine. No, I hadn't heard that part. What happened to her? They say her family was cursed, he continued, leaning closer. After she disappeared, her parents fell into despair, and the house has been empty ever since. People say you can still hear her laughter on quiet nights, echoing through the halls. That was all Emma needed to hear. The following weekend, armed with nothing but a flashlight and her sense of adventure, she made her way to Willow Lane. The house loomed ahead, its windows like vacant eyes watching her approach. The front door, slightly ajar, creaked ominously in the breeze. Stepping inside, Emma felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight filtering through the dirty windows. The air was thick with the scent of decay, but there was something else, an undercurrent of sadness that tugged at her heart. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. The silence that followed was heavy, but Emma pressed on, driven by an inexplicable connection to the place. The interior was a jumble of forgotten memories. Old photographs hung crookedly on the walls, their faces blurred by time. She picked up a framed picture of a family, a mother, a father, and a little girl with bright, hopeful eyes. A chill crept through her as she recognized the child. It was the same girl from Max's story. "Who are you?" Emma whispered, feeling an eerie sensation wash over her. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing, waiting for someone to unlock its secrets. Determined to explore further, Emma ventured deeper into the house. The living room was filled with old furniture, covered in white sheets like ghosts waiting for a moment to awaken. As she stepped across the threshold, her foot caught on something. Looking down, she saw a small, faded diary lying on the floor. She picked it up, its leather cover cracked and worn. The initials LM were embossed on the front. Her heart raced as she realized it belonged to the little girl from the photograph. Flipping it open, Emma's eyes scanned the delicate handwriting within. "Today was a beautiful day. Mama took me to the park. I met a new friend, but I wish Papa would smile again." Each entry tugged at Emma's heartstrings, revealing the girl's dreams and fears. But then, the tone shifted. "Something strange is happening in the house. I can hear whispers at night, but Mama says they're just my imagination. I want to believe her, but I don't. What if it's the shadows?" Emma's breath caught in her throat. She could almost feel the girl's presence beside her, a fleeting spirit trapped in time. The final entry was dated just a few days before the girl had disappeared. "I'm scared. I think the shadows want me." Emma's heart raced, a mix of dread and determination flooding her veins. She had to know what had happened to this girl, Lily. But as she read those haunting words, a noise echoed through the house, a soft, childlike giggle that sent shivers down her spine. "Lily," she called, her voice barely a whisper. "Is that you?" The giggle turned into a soft melody, floating through the air like a lullaby. Emma felt a pull, an urge to follow the sound, and she moved cautiously through the house, her heart pounding in her chest. The melody led her to the staircase, its steps worn and creaking under her weight. She climbed slowly, her pulse quickening with each step. At the top, she found a long hallway lined with closed doors, each one holding a potential secret. As she walked down the hallway, the giggle grew louder, resonating off the walls. Emma reached the end, where a door stood slightly ajar. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open, revealing a small room bathed in the soft light of the afternoon sun. Inside, the room was untouched by time. It was decorated with toys, stuffed animals, and a small bed covered in a bright patchwork quilt. In the corner stood a dollhouse that seemed almost too perfect, its tiny windows reflecting the sunlight like a beacon. As Emma stepped into the room, she felt a rush of emotion, as if she had entered a sanctuary of lost dreams. She moved closer to the dollhouse, her fingers brushing against its intricately painted surface. Suddenly, the melody stopped, and the atmosphere shifted. Emma felt a chill in the air, and she turned to see a shadow dart across the wall, flickering like a flame. "Lily," she called, her voice echoing in the stillness. "Are you here?" The shadow stopped, and for a brief moment, Emma felt a presence beside her, a gentle tug at her heart. She closed her eyes, trying to connect with the spirit of the girl who had once filled this room with laughter. "Help me," a voice whispered, faint but clear, sending a wave of fear and sadness coursing through her. Emma opened her eyes, and the room seemed to shimmer with energy. The dollhouse flickered, its windows glowing softly, and she felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. Lily needed her help, and she was determined to find out what had happened to her. As Emma prepared to dig deeper into the mystery, she could feel the weight of the past bearing down on her. It was more than just a story. It was a heart-wrenching tale of loss and longing, waiting for someone to breathe life into its forgotten echoes. Emma stood frozen in the small, sunlit room, the shadows of the past flickering around her like whispers in the wind. The gentle tug at her heart urged her to understand the haunting mystery of Lily's disappearance. With determination coursing through her veins, she began to search for clues. She moved closer to the dollhouse, its intricate details mesmerizing her. Each room was furnished with tiny furniture, and in one corner stood a miniature version of the very room she was in. It felt eerily alive, as if it held secrets waiting to be uncovered. As she examined the dollhouse, Emma noticed a small door at the back, barely visible beneath the delicate facade. Curiosity piqued. She opened it, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a faded piece of paper, crumpled and fragile. Emma carefully unfolded it, revealing a drawing. It depicted a dark figure with elongated limbs and a twisted face, looming over a smaller figure, Lily. Beneath the drawing, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "The Shadow Man." Emma's heart raced. The story she had heard echoed in her mind. The Shadow Man, they said, was a tale told to frighten children, a ghostly figure that lured the innocent into the dark corners of the world. But what if it wasn't just a story? What if the Shadow Man was real, and he had something to do with Lily's fate? The air around her grew heavy, and Emma felt a chill creeping up her spine. She looked around the room, her instincts telling her she was not alone. A faint giggle echoed once more, this time from the hallway. Mustering her courage, she stepped out of the room and followed the sound, her heart pounding with anticipation. As she moved down the hallway, the laughter danced in the air, leading her to the end of the corridor where a door stood ajar. With trembling hands, Emma pushed it open and found herself in a dimly lit attic, filled with forgotten memories and dusty relics of a past life. Old trunks and boxes lay scattered about, their contents spilling into the corners of the room. A single window illuminated the space, casting eerie shadows that seemed to shift and sway. Emma felt an overwhelming urge to explore every inch of the attic, convinced that the answers to Lily's disappearance lay within. She rummaged through the boxes, discovering old toys, clothes, and photographs. One photo caught her eye, a picture of a family gathered in front of the house, the same smiling faces from the frame she had seen downstairs. But this time, Lily stood at the center, her innocent smile bright against the backdrop of their home. Suddenly, something brushed against Emma's leg. She jumped back, heart racing, but it was only a small cat, its fur matted and dirty, yet its eyes glimmered with curiosity. "Hey there, little guy," Emma said, bending down to pet the cat. "Do you live here too?" The cat purred softly, rubbing against her hand, and for a moment, she felt a sense of companionship amidst the haunting atmosphere. As she continued to search, Emma discovered a dusty old trunk in the corner. It was locked, but the rusted latch was weak. With a determined tug, she pried it open. Inside, she found a collection of letters, all addressed to Lily. Her heart sank as she began to read them, realizing they were written by her mother. "Dear Lily," one letter began, "I miss you every day. The world feels darker without your laughter." The letters continued, each one filled with love, longing, and an undeniable sadness that seemed to seep from the pages. Emma's chest tightened with every word she read. It was clear that Lily's family had been shattered by her disappearance. But where had she gone? The letters didn't hold the answer, only fragments of a love that could never be fulfilled. As she sifted through the letters, a sudden noise startled her. The door to the attic slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the cramped space. Emma spun around, her heart racing. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling in the stillness. There was no answer, only the sound of her own breath echoing in the dim light. She rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic gripped her as she pushed against it, the wood refusing to give way. The atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with the weight of unseen eyes watching her every move. Then, from the corner of her eye, she noticed the shadow, a dark figure standing in the far corner of the attic, barely illuminated by the fading light. Emma's breath hitched in her throat as she realized it resembled the drawing from the dollhouse. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice firm despite the fear swirling inside her. The figure remained still, its presence chilling yet oddly familiar. Suddenly, the figure began to move, gliding closer to her with an unsettling grace. Emma felt a mix of fear and compassion, recognizing the sorrow etched in its form. It was not just a shadow, it was a part of the story, a remnant of Lily's pain. The figure raised its hand, pointing toward a corner of the attic where the floorboards appeared slightly warped. Emma's heart raced as she approached the spot. She knelt down, examining the boards closely. "Is there something hidden here?" she whispered, feeling a connection to the figure behind her. Without hesitation, she began to pry the warped boards up, her fingers trembling with anticipation. As the last board lifted away, she discovered a small, dust-covered box hidden beneath. Emma's heart raced as she opened it, revealing a collection of trinkets, small toys, a hairpin, and a locket containing a faded photograph of Lily and her mother. Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she realized the depth of Lily's longing for home and the family she had lost. But what had happened to her? And how could she help this lost spirit find peace? The shadow behind her shifted, its form growing more defined, as if responding to her emotions. Emma understood then. This was Lily, or at least a piece of her, trapped in the house, yearning for closure. "I won't leave you," Emma vowed, her voice resolute. "I'll find out what happened to you. I promise." The shadow flickered, a soft light emanating from it, as if acknowledging her promise. In that moment, Emma knew she was not just uncovering a dark secret. She was embarking on a journey to heal a broken heart. With renewed determination, Emma clutched the box of trinkets tightly in her hands, a promise forming in her heart. She could feel Lily's presence guiding her, urging her to uncover the truth hidden within the walls of this abandoned house. As she rose, the attic seemed to pulse with energy, as if the very air was alive with memories. Emma glanced back at the shadow of Lily, which flickered like candlelight, its edges softening. "What do I do next?" she whispered, half expecting an answer. Instead, a gentle breeze swept through the attic, causing the dust motes to dance in the fading sunlight. The feeling of encouragement washed over her. Leaving the attic behind, she descended the narrow staircase, clutching the box of treasures. Each step felt heavier, as if the weight of the house's past was pressing down on her. She needed to dig deeper, to unravel the threads of history that had led to this moment. The living room was unchanged, still adorned with the remnants of a family who had once filled it with laughter. Emma set the box down on the coffee table and spread its contents before her. Each item held a memory, and she could feel the energy pulsing from them, connecting her to Lily. As she examined the hairpin, her mind flashed back to the photograph of Lily in her mother's letters. She had a similar hairpin in her hair, a small, delicate thing that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. "Maybe this belonged to your mother," Emma murmured, holding it delicately between her fingers. Just then, The light in the room dimmed as clouds passed over the sun, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Emma felt a chill creep up her spine, reminding her of the house's history. She needed to uncover the truth about what had happened, not just for herself, but for Lily. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, Emma searched the living room for any more clues. She turned her attention to the bookshelf against the far wall, filled with dust-covered novels and faded photographs. One photo caught her eye, another picture of the family, but this time, there was a strange figure lurking in the background, a shadowy silhouette that made her skin crawl. "What are you hiding?" Emma asked the photo, almost jokingly, but her heart was racing. She reached for the picture, inspecting it closely. As she did, a piece of paper slipped out from behind it and floated to the floor. Emma picked it up, her hands trembling. It was a letter, yellowed and brittle, with spidery handwriting that spoke of fear and desperation. "Dear Emma," it began, though the name confused her momentarily. "I don't know if anyone will ever find this, but I must tell our story. Lily was never meant to disappear. The day she went missing, I saw something that no child should ever witness. It was the Shadow Man. He took her." Emma's heart raced as she read on, each line revealing more of the family's struggles. The author of the letter spoke of shadows lurking in the corners of their lives, growing darker and more oppressive as time went on. "The Shadow Man feeds on sorrow," it warned, "and our family was drowning in it." Who wrote this? Emma wondered aloud, her breath quickening. "Is it you, Lily? Is this your mother?" As if in response, a soft whisper floated through the air, barely audible yet distinct. "Help me." Emma's heart ached at the sound. She was in the middle of a haunting mystery, and it was becoming clear that the Shadow Man was not just a tale, but a living presence that had impacted the lives of everyone in the house. The shadows around her felt heavier now, as if they were closing in. Determined to understand the extent of Lily's family's suffering, Emma continued to search the room. Behind the bookshelf, she noticed a small, hidden door, its outline barely visible against the wall. The thrill of discovery ignited a fire within her, and she pulled the door open. Inside was a small, darkened space, lined with cobwebs and dust. The air was stale, and a musty smell filled her nostrils. Emma took a deep breath and stepped inside. The walls were adorned with drawings, crude yet expressive, depicting a young girl with bright eyes and a smile, surrounded by a dark figure with outstretched arms. Lily's drawings, she realized, revealing a child's world of fear and confusion. Each image told a story of a time when she had felt the presence of the Shadow Man, lurking just out of sight, watching and waiting. Emma's fingers traced the drawings as she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Lily. I won't let him take you away." Suddenly, the door behind her slammed shut, trapping her in the darkened space. Panic surged through her as she tugged at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "No, let me out," she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. As the darkness closed in around her, the shadowy figure she had seen before flickered into view, its form growing solid. "Help me," it whispered, the words laced with sorrow. "Lily." Emma's heart raced as she recognized the familiar silhouette. "I'm here to help you, but I need you to show me what happened." The figure nodded, its hand reaching out as if inviting Emma to follow. The shadow began to move, guiding her deeper into the hidden space, where the walls were damp and cold. The drawings blurred together, forming a continuous scene, a depiction of a child's horror. As they moved forward, the darkness thickened, the air growing colder. Emma felt the weight of despair wrapping around her like a shroud. "What happened, Lily?" she asked, her voice trembling. The figure paused at the end of the small passage, and Emma felt a sudden rush of memories flood her mind. Flickers of Lily's life, the laughter, the family gatherings, the warmth of home, before being overshadowed by darkness. Then came the memory of fear, of a shadow creeping into her life, whispering promises of power and loneliness. "Don't listen to him," Emma cried out, grasping the figure's hand tightly. "You're stronger than this. You can fight him." But the Shadow Man loomed closer, and Emma could feel his presence, a cold, suffocating darkness that wrapped around her like a blanket. "You can't escape me," A voice echoed in the depths of her mind. "You belong to the shadows now." "No," Emma shouted defiantly. "I will not let you take her." In that moment, the air crackled with energy. The shadow wavered, flickering like a candle in the wind. Emma realized that her resolve was a beacon of light in the overwhelming darkness. She focused on the love and memories she had uncovered, holding them tightly in her heart. "I will help you, Lily," she whispered, her voice steady. "Together, we'll break free." The shadow responded, its form solidifying into something more tangible, more human. It took a deep breath, and for the first time, Emma saw a glimmer of hope in the darkness. As the grip of the shadow man began to loosen, Emma knew they were on the verge of something powerful. But would it be enough to finally reveal the truth behind Lily's disappearance and free her from the haunting grip of the past? The room around Emma pulsed with an intense energy, a strange amalgamation of fear and hope. The shadow that had once been a mere silhouette now held a semblance of form, its outline taking shape as Lily's ghostly figure began to shine with an inner light. Emma felt her heart race with excitement and trepidation. This was their moment. "Lily," Emma breathed, reaching out for her. "We can do this together. We can confront the shadow man." The air crackled with anticipation as Lily nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. With renewed strength, Emma pushed forward, urging Lily to take her hand. They were not alone in this battle. Together, they would fight for the truth, for Lily's freedom, and for closure for the family that had once filled this house with joy. As they stepped forward into the darkened passage, the oppressive presence of the shadow man loomed larger, the air growing colder and more suffocating. Shadows flickered around them, coiling and shifting, but Emma felt a warmth radiating from Lily that repelled the darkness. It felt like a lifeline, guiding them through the murky depths of despair. "Show yourself," Emma called out, her voice steady and fierce. "We know what you've done. You can't hide behind fear any longer." The shadow man emerged from the depths of the darkened passage, his form grotesque and shifting, a swirling mass of darkness with eyes that glowed like embers. "Foolish child," he hissed, his voice a blend of mockery and menace. "You think you can free her? She belongs to me. She is mine." "No," Emma shouted, her resolve igniting like a flame. "You don't own her. She deserves to be free, to live without your torment." Lily stepped beside Emma, her figure glowing brighter as she faced the shadow man. "You can't have me anymore," she declared, her voice strong despite the trembling of the air. "I refuse to be your prisoner." As their voices resonated through the darkness, the shadow man twisted and writhed, his form flickering in response to their defiance. "You're nothing without me, child. You were lost and alone. I gave you power." Emma could feel the truth of his words weighing heavily in the air, but she pressed on, determined not to falter. Power isn't found in darkness. It's found in love and connection. You may have brought fear, but we choose to embrace hope. In that moment, Emma recalled the memories she had unearthed, the laughter, the warmth, the love that had filled the house before the darkness arrived. She called upon those feelings, letting them swell within her until they overflowed, creating a radiant light that illuminated the dark passage. Lily mirrored her actions, her figure shimmering with the same warmth, and together, they faced the shadow man, their combined strength pushing back against the dark. The air crackled as light clashed against shadow, illuminating the depths of the hidden space with an ethereal glow. "You think you can defeat me?" the shadow man bellowed, his voice echoing in anger and disbelief. "I am fear. I am darkness. You are nothing." "No," Emma shouted back, her voice unwavering. "We are everything. We are love. We are connection. And we are not afraid of you." As their light surged forward, it pierced through the oppressive darkness, illuminating the walls adorned with Lily's drawings. Each image glowed brightly, revealing the truth behind her fear, her loneliness, and her pain. They were not just sketches. They were a call for help, a testament to a child who had once been filled with joy but had been ensnared by fear. With every line and every color, the drawing seemed to resonate with Emma's strength, merging with the light to create an overwhelming force against the shadow man. The darkness around them twisted and churned, trying to fight back, but it was no match for the strength of their unity. "No more," Lily cried, her voice ringing with conviction. "You will not take any more from us." As the shadow man writhed in pain, the light continued to expand, illuminating every corner of the hidden space. Emma felt a surge of power as the shadows began to retreat, their hold on the room weakening with each passing moment. Finally, with one last push of light, Emma and Lily released all their combined energy, a brilliant beam that struck the shadow man directly. He let out a shriek that echoed through the passage, a sound filled with rage and despair, and in an instant, the darkness shattered, dissolving into nothingness. As the shadows faded away, a profound silence enveloped the room. Emma and Lily stood amidst the remnants of the battle, breathing heavily, but filled with a sense of triumph. The air felt lighter, warmer, as if the weight of years of fear had been lifted. "Is it over?" Emma asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. Lily's figure shimmered, a smile of gratitude lighting up her face. "Yes," she whispered, her voice soft yet resolute. "Thank you for helping me find my way home." In that moment, Emma realized that Lily was beginning to fade, the light surrounding her growing softer. "Wait, don't go," Emma pleaded, a pang of sadness gripping her heart. "I have to," Lily replied gently, "but I'll always be with you. You've given me the freedom I've longed for. Remember our light, Emma. It's powerful." As the last remnants of Lily's figure melted away into a cascade of sparkles, Emma felt a warmth envelop her, a sense of peace that filled the space once haunted by darkness. She knew that the bond they had formed would remain forever etched in her heart. In the silence that followed, Emma took a deep breath, allowing herself to feel the calm that had settled in the room. She looked around at the drawings that had once seemed haunting, but now felt like a celebration of love and resilience. This house was no longer just an abandoned shell. It was a home filled with memories waiting to be cherished. With newfound purpose, Emma gathered the remnants of the past, the drawings, the box of trinkets, and the stories waiting to be told. As she stepped outside into the sunlight, she felt a sense of closure wash over her. Lily was free, and so was she. The house would become a place of healing, a sanctuary for the stories that had been forgotten, a testament to the power of love overcoming darkness. As Emma stepped outside, the world felt vibrant and alive, filled with possibilities she had not noticed before. The sun bathed the landscape in warm golden light, illuminating the garden that had once been overgrown and neglected. It was as if the house itself breathed a sigh of relief, shedding the darkness that had clung to it for so long. With renewed purpose, Emma returned to the house, her heart set on transforming it into a place of solace, a refuge for anyone who had ever felt lost or afraid. She envisioned it as a community space where stories could be shared, where laughter could echo through the halls, and where the whispers of the past could be honored. She began by clearing the overgrown garden, pulling out weeds and planting bright flowers that danced in the gentle breeze. Each bloom felt like a promise, a symbol of rebirth and renewal. As she worked, Emma thought of Lily and the shadow that had once haunted this space. It was time to create new memories that would drown out the echoes of sorrow. As the days turned into weeks, Emma dedicated herself to restoring the house. She painted the walls in soft, welcoming colors, filling the rooms with warmth and light. She hung Lily's drawings throughout the house, turning each corner into a gallery of hope and creativity. The house, once a prison of darkness, was transforming into a sanctuary of joy. News of the house's restoration spread through the community, and soon, people began to stop by, drawn by the changes they could see. Emma welcomed them with open arms, sharing her vision for a community gathering space. With each new face, she felt the weight of the past lift a little more, replaced by the joy of connection and friendship. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching the sun set, Emma reflected on how far she had come. The shadows of the past no longer haunted her. Instead, they had become a part of her story, a story of resilience and healing. In that moment, she understood that it was not just the house that had transformed, but also her own heart. Just then, she heard a soft voice calling her name. Startled, Emma turned to find an elderly woman standing at the edge of the garden, her frail frame wrapped in a shawl. There was something familiar about her, a warmth in her eyes that sparked a sense of recognition. "Hello," Emma said, rising to greet the woman. "Can I help you?" The woman stepped closer, her gaze scanning the garden, the house, and then returning to Emma. "I used to live here many years ago," she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "My name is Margaret." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Margaret? I've heard stories about you. You lived here with your family, right?" A gentle smile spread across Margaret's face. "Yes, but those were troubled times. I was young, and we had to leave abruptly. This house holds many memories, both good and bad. Would you like to come inside?" Emma offered, feeling a spark of connection. "I'd love to hear your stories." Margaret nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears as she stepped inside the house. As they moved through the rooms, Margaret's voice filled the air with tales of laughter and love, of childhood adventures and dreams woven into the very fabric of the walls. Emma listened intently, captivated by the stories that brought the house to life. With each memory, the past began to intertwine with the present, creating a tapestry of shared experiences. Margaret spoke of Lily, too, her vibrant spirit and the light she brought into the world. Lily was a special child, Margaret recalled fondly. She had an imagination that could light up the darkest corners. It's heartbreaking what happened to her. As Emma heard these stories, she felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This house was not just a building. It was a vessel for the memories of those who had come before. She wanted to honor those memories and ensure that Lily's spirit would live on, not in fear, but in joy. "Would you be willing to share more stories?" Emma asked eagerly. "I'd love to host gatherings here, where people can come together, share their experiences, and remember the past." Margaret's eyes sparkled with delight. "I'd be honored to help. We could start a storytelling night, inviting anyone who wants to share their tales. It could be a way to keep the memories alive." As they sat on the porch under the glowing twilight, Emma felt a sense of purpose igniting within her. The past had been a haunting shadow, but now it had transformed into a source of strength and connection. With Margaret by her side, she began to plan the first storytelling night, excited about the community it would bring together. The following weeks saw a flurry of activity as Emma and Margaret worked to spread the word about their upcoming event. They decorated the house, creating a cozy space filled with cushions and blankets, setting the stage for an evening of shared stories. Emma felt a buzz of anticipation in the air, knowing that they were reviving the spirit of the house. On the night of the first gathering, the aroma of freshly baked cookies wafted through the air as guests arrived, their laughter and chatter filling the once silent rooms. Emma greeted each person with warmth, feeling a deep sense of belonging in the community that had gathered around her. As the evening progressed, Emma sat in a circle with the attendees, and one by one, they shared their stories, some of joy, others of sorrow, but all resonating with the themes of love and resilience. Emma watched in awe as the walls absorbed their words, the house coming alive with each tale. When it was Emma's turn, she took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the room surround her. "This house holds many memories," she began, "and while it has faced darkness, I believe it is now a place of light. Together, we can ensure that the stories, both past and present, continue to resonate in our lives." As she spoke, she felt the presence of Lily beside her, the warmth of her spirit guiding her. Emma knew that she was not just telling a story. She was honoring a legacy of love and connection that would echo through the generations. The night ended with laughter and tears, but more importantly, it ended with a sense of hope and belonging. Emma had created something beautiful, a bridge between the past and the present, a sanctuary for shared experiences and memories that would never be forgotten. As the last guest departed, Emma stood on the porch, looking out at the stars twinkling above. The house was no longer haunted. It was a home, a place of refuge where stories could be shared and where love could flourish. And in that moment, Emma understood that the shadows of the past had finally been laid to rest, allowing the light to shine through, illuminating the path forward. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents.